Hello and welcome to the B&B show. My name here is Brandon. This guy over here to my left, that's Brendan. Seahawks, Brendan Nelson in the house, as he does here on our Thursday show. Brendan, it's good to have you on in here as we are inching closer to the season.
Good to be here. Thank you, Brandon, for having me back on.
Well, we got quite a bit to look at in various different little areas, even though it is a preseason game where you don't typically always have as much to go through. But we've got some recent Seahawks news, rumors of background stuff. And then right now, today, Brendan, actually breaking news. I know we both covered it on each of our channels, just giving kind of a quick scope over of this trade. It's not certainly a ground earth-shaking trade in that respect, but as we're a couple hours after the trade, do you find yourself sitting as the Seahawks flip a player in Michael Jackson for Michael Barrett, inside linebacker, 7th rounder last year?
Right. So obviously, this was something that we spoke about, trading a cornerback to clear the logjam. And maybe I thought we were going to get a draft pick out of it. I would argue this is probably a little bit better than that. But the idea was we've got too many cornerbacks that need to play, that need to make the team, and not enough spots to play cornerbacks. You're only going to get so many cornerbacks on the field at once. And Mike Jackson was a guy who we only had 1 year of club control left on. He was, I think, very clearly not going to be here next year because we're going to have to pay Woolen or Witherspoon or maybe both in the very near future. I just don't think we can make that work. So yeah, you trade Mike Jackson, who is a pretty good player. I want to stress that very much. I think Mike Jackson's a pretty good player. He did some good work here. It wasn't all great, but I think he did good stuff here. And we addressed this position of clear need, linebacker. It is the position that we always talk about is like the depth is very, very thin. And one injury could completely sink that position. Like we have very little going on there. And I'm not saying that changes radically with this trade, but you do get somebody who is young, rookie, hasn't played the NFL yet. You get somebody who has a connection to Mike Macdonald because Mike Macdonald was his DC at Michigan in 2021. And you get somebody who, and I think people lose track of this when they're evaluating this trade because on the surface, yeah, Mike Jackson's a better player than Michael Barrett, but you have 4 years of cheap club control on him. He's on that rookie deal for 4 years at about $1 million a year. So to me, it's a really good trade just on that level of it. You take care of a lot of different things you needed to do at once. You clear that little bit of cap space. You get somebody you have more control over going into the future years. You remove the need to cut a potentially talented player. Like if you were going to cut Mike Jackson, which I don't know if we were, but if you were going to cut Mike Jackson, now you get something out of it. It's a pretty big win all around, I think. I wasn't a big fan of Michael Barrett. I did evaluate him a little bit pre-draft. I wasn't a big fan, but I don't need to be a big fan. Something's better than nothing, and we got something out of it.
Yeah, he's got some NFL traits and ability, maybe not as far as you would go to potential stardom, but he certainly fits in here at the NFL level. And, there's a way you've got to use him. I think going to this defense in the Ravens, like the defense he played with in Michigan, is kind of the exact style of defense he has to go to find success. And that's going to help him out a lot. He's really downhill in the film that I remember watching with them, Brendan. And as long as you can keep him in that downhill functionality of playing and not trying to have to read and react things and think things through a lot, he can be really good in that role. And as Macdonald has shown, he understands how to use guys in the right roles and put them into that position to succeed, to doing what they do best. I think there's a good chance here, Brendan, too, that with this, might have been a chance here Michael Jackson didn't even make the active roster this year, because I still do maintain that I think that this was going to come down to either you're going to have to keep Michael Jackson and cut one of the Auburn corners, or you'd have to cut Michael Jackson to keep both of the Auburn corners on the active roster. Oh, you're muted.
I'm sorry about that. D. Williams is entering the conversation a little bit here as well, right? I mean, D. Williams is a guy who is making a push for a roster spot. You've still got Artie Burns lingering. So you don't lose that much here. There are other guys that you could put on this roster in place of Mike Jackson, who maybe they're not quite as good as Mike Jackson, but it's close. It's competitive. It's reasonable. So I definitely see the upshot here. Don't get me wrong. Mike Jackson was a good player. People are way too hard on him sometimes, I think, for things that are not really in his control.
Mm.
But at the end of the day, there's just a logjam at that position, especially if the Seahawks are planning on going 3 safety looks a lot this year, because there's been talk about that because Kayvon's looked so good that we might see a lot of looks with Jenkins, Love, and Wallace on the field all at once. And if you do that, then there's even less of a need to be super deep at cornerback.
Yeah, it is true. It is very true. And I think that could have been the way that they flip the scales on this. It'll be interesting the way they do keep it, though, because it's, in my eyes, you got Woolen, Witherspoon, and Brown. That's 3. That gives you a stack of 2 others that you can keep beyond that. I know we've said maybe they'll keep the 6 here. Maybe they'll keep that. We'll see which way the 53-man roster settles out. But it's a tight numbers game. And you didn't want to have something happen with Jackson where you basically lost him for nothing if you did release him. This happened to us with Melton a couple of years ago when we lost Bo Melton to the Packers because the receiver core was so stacked and we couldn't find a creative trade like this to get this to happen. And I think you were able to locate that here and now, and it's just makes it all that better of a trade that John found this creative solution to this in a way. And like you say, I think, and I agree with this, Brendan, it's better than a 7th round pick because it's not coming down in the future. It's actually happening right now.
Right. And it's when I talked about trading Mike Jackson, the compensation I suggested was like a 6th round pick in next year's draft, which is basically what we got, right? Because the common rule of thumb is if you push a pick out by 1 year, it loses 1 round of value. So getting Michael Barrett now is kind of like getting a 6th round pick later because Barrett was a 7th round pick. And by the way, when I looked at him pre-draft, I did evaluate him as being about a 7th round value. So I think they pretty much got that right. So yeah, we pretty much got the appropriate value for him. Some people were feeling like we should have gotten way more than that, but cornerbacks tend to be kind of a dime a dozen in this league. They don't go for that much unless they're stars. I think that quite often NFL fans kind of get caught by surprise when they see how little trade value a player has. But when you're a veteran and you're getting closer and closer to potentially getting a bigger contract, when you're getting to the age where you're clearly going to be past your prime or you're not that far away from that, you lose a lot of value compared to even a very low level draft pick, a very low level pick that is still young, that is going to have that 4 years of really cheap club control. So getting anything in that regard is actually pretty impressive, and I'm pretty happy with it.
Me as well. I also think there's something he said for the fact that he's more of a really zone-based corner, a good tackler and a zone-based corner, and not a bad player at all. I agree with you there. Just he's also not really a man corner. So this defense is going to ask its guys, if you look down the line now, kind of from the front to the back end, guys on this roster, all of them have a background of playing both man and zone. And that's just not quite what he does well. So probably a little bit of another thing that may push this just a bit. But good move. Smart move, Brendan. And something to feel really good about. What's kind of our next order of business up here is some of our items we were going to look at.
All right. Well, should we keep it to the stuff that's kind of happening off the field here before we get to the recap and then the preview?
Sure.
All right. So next thing that has happened over the last week, there was a little bit of stuff going on with Geno Smith. Not a lot. I want to stress that, because I made a video about it. I think some people kind of got the wrong idea. I think they were under the impression that there was like a holdout now. There's not. But basically, Geno Smith, it was, we talked about this a little bit last week. There was some discussion that Geno Smith might get an extension from the Seahawks now. And that obviously hasn't happened yet. But one thing we've learned over the last week is that it was Geno Smith's camp that proposed it. The Seahawks did not go to Geno Smith with an extension. Geno Smith went to the Seahawks and was like, hey, how about an extension? And obviously it didn't happen. And then Geno Smith scrubbed his Instagram account, which is often associated with that, a sports player that is unhappy with the current proceedings, which I don't know if that's what it was, by the way, to be clear. I don't want to make any assumptions there. Maybe he did it as like a, new year, new me kind of thing. Maybe he did it because he lost a bet. I don't know, right? There are a bunch of reasons why that could happen, but it's a reasonable assumption.
I think the timing of it basically, to me, infers that it is that. If this was happening at 2 different times, then okay. But the fact that it comes right on the heels, and then that there doesn't sound like there's a lot of interest in the Seahawks camp in doing this contract extension, probably pretty firmly puts it in the place of him trying to do that new age move here, Brendan.
Mm-hmm. Right. And, I've been pretty open to the idea of a Geno extension, and I know you've been too. But I think we both know the Seahawks do not, as a general rule, they do not negotiate with players until they're on the last year of their deal. It's like a very firm rule, even in situations where it would not be that hard. This was a long time ago, granted, but same GM, Cam Chancellor, 9 years ago, went to the Seahawks front office, wanted a very insignificant adjustment on his contract. And the team said, beat it. And Cam Chancellor held out for the first 2 games of the 2015 season, trying to get that adjustment rather. And the team was like, no, you have 3 years left on your deal. You honor your contract. Eventually he did show up, but that's Cam Chancellor. That's a Seahawks legend. That's somebody who almost won Super Bowl MVP just 2 years prior and they were like, no, because they don't want to open up that can of worms of being like, okay, we did it for this guy. Now 20 players are going to line up saying you should do it for me too. So I don't think anybody should be surprised that they're not touching that.
Yeah, I don't either. I think it's from the player's position. I understand him asking it, but if I was the team in this situation, you've got to stand tall, don't you, Brendan, and say, look, this doesn't make any sense for us to do this right here. We have the leverage. There's 2 years left in the deal. We have a standard of model that we don't do new deals. I think you can count like 3 times in the entire time Schneider's been here that they've redone deals with 2 years left remaining on them. So we don't do it. And you're going to have to wait this out. And if he goes out and he balls out, it's really in their favor to have maximum flexibility of the type of moves they could make, Brendan. If he goes out and has that great season, re-sign him up, potential trade, he's going to get paid at that time. And that's where, from Geno's perspective, when it comes to any of these quarterbacks, you can't really press as much that whole thing, can you? My major injury thing, and I won't get, like, they always get to their usual payment. They always end up making their money for the most part, as long as they're still good.
Right. And again, I want to stress, I'm not closing the door on this personally. I still think a Geno extension might make some sense, but what is Geno's motivation here? So I see something like this. I hear about something like this, and I wonder, what is he asking for? Because if you're going to get an extension with 2 years left on your deal, the only way I'm doing it is if you're willing to work with me here. You got to compromise big time, or else what's the point? Like, if he's coming here and he's asking for like an extension of like $30 million a year, then okay, I'm doing that. I'm excited to do that. Maybe if it's like 33 or 34, but you start getting up to like 40 or something, it's like, now you're not working with me. What if he wants to get paid like what Kirk Cousins got paid from the Falcons? Like, at that point, you're not working with me at all. So, we don't know what Geno Smith is thinking here. A lot of people have bandied about theories. Some people think he only gave us a discount because Carroll was here. Now that Carroll's not here, he feels like, I want the money that I left on the table now. Some people think that he just looked up and saw a bunch of quarterbacks that I think he's better than get paid twice what he got paid, like Tua, like Jared Goff. And he's like, oh man, I really messed up. I got to make this right. But we don't know what he's asking for, right? He could be asking for 50 million. He's like, Jared Goff got 50 million. I'm better than that guy. Where's my 50 million? And if that's the case, then there's nothing to talk about.
There really is not. And I'm probably a little more firmer in the camp of saying that I wouldn't want to do this, Brendan. At the end of the day, it's $27 million remaining left of his bonus money that still needs to come off the books of the current deal. And any new deal is going to want to add new bonus money on top of that. You can say, well, we're going to lower down the base to this. But if you're going to have to then still account for a major amount of bonus money, and with quarterbacks, they get a lot of bonus money, then it's really not going to make any kind of sense to save Seattle money in the interim nor the long term. So where's the favor to here? Well, we're going to just do right by Geno because reasons. And we signed him to just his contract. It was just signed. So this is more, to me, I understand him asking, but he can't hardline this. And really, he's got to be understanding from where the team's coming from, because this was his agent's job to max out his contract on the last extension. That's when you had the leverage. That's when you were a free agent. And if what was important to you was making market prices, which you and I have inferred a little bit and given him credit for, that it would seem that in the deal he took, that was not his driving force, then stay in that lane. Don't suddenly pivot out of it now because you start seeing the market prices go up a bit. Which is it? Do you want to be the guy that, hey, I took a discount, I want a good team around me? Or is it you're pushing for every last dollar? And that's what does confuse me a little bit about this deal and looking at him, is that you could every agent could have told him in his ear a year ago with their salt, hey, this is where the quarterback prices are heading to. Trevor, Lawrence, all these guys are going to come up to be paid. This is where it's going if we sign here. And so it's more bad representation to me than it is that the Seahawks owe him something on this one.
Right, right. And again, if there was a way to make it work for both sides, I would be for it. But we don't know if that way exists. Like you said, with the bonus money, that makes things very complicated. That makes things very difficult to work out. Maybe it's still possible, but again, if this is motivated by him looking at the quarterback market and wanting to get paid like everyone else got paid, there's really not much we can do right now. Like at a certain point, you have to honor your contract. That was the Cam Chancellor thing, right? What Cam Chancellor was asking for was very minor, but the team was like, no, we have to hold firm here. You have to honor your contract. That's the contract you signed. Deal with it.
And to your point, let's walk this through as to why Schneider might be still being, to your example, why he came out of that situation and formed in a given direction as it now looks towards the Geno situation. Because they did kind of cave on the Cam thing eventually. You have Marshawn Lynch out there wearing Cam Chancellor jerseys at practice when Cam held out that year. They did make a minor adjustment. What happened, Brendan, on the end of that contract with Cam?
Yeah, it was bad. I'm not saying anything negative about Cam. I don't want people to misinterpret what I'm saying.
This is about giving out contracts or not signing anything about with Cam. It's just about John looking at that situation and being informed by recent history when he said, going in this, I didn't want to do this with 2 years remaining. This is a risk for us. We don't like doing it. He did it, hit you on the hands. It didn't work. Prior to that, he did it with Marshawn Lynch. With Marshawn Lynch, he wanted an adjustment done. They did an adjustment on Marshawn Lynch. He came back a year and he goes, oh, I want to go to the Raiders so I can go to my hometown team so that I can savor the last of my hometown team's year before my blah, 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 blah. Well, now you're eating dead money on that one. So that was my thing with this. Is more just it's hurt them both times they've gone down to do this. And to me, it makes it really unlikely they would do it again.
Right. And I just wanted to clarify that because people are going to take that the wrong way, I think.
They'll get sensitive about it.
Yeah, that ended up, I think we gave Bennett an extension that we ended up really regretting, Michael Bennett, if I recall correctly. Maybe there was one with Averill. I can't remember because Averill's career obviously ended like basically instantaneously. There might have been some dead money there. I'm not 100% sure on that one.
There was dead money, but I think you're right about if I want to the guys that I think were able to come back and still get an adjustment with 2 years remaining. I know it was Marshawn, Cam, and it might have been Bennett as the third guy with it. That, like you said, you ended up bailing on that. I think with Averill, it was just the pure deal of it, but there was dead money. There was still a lot of dead money because he had just kind of signed it.
Right. So the team doesn't really do this, and I think there are some situations where it would be beneficial to, but again, I think these players just need to understand the give and take here. With some of these players, like you said, great example. Russell Wilson signs an extension in 2018. 1 year later, he wants a trade. It's like, dude, why'd you sign the extension? We literally cannot trade you. If we trade you, we are fielding a team full of veteran minimum players next year because we will have no money. Like, you shouldn't have signed the extension.
Yeah, the going thing goes, Brendan, you heard all the time, the cap's not real. There's ways, and yes, you can manipulate things, but you also can run up against stuff that really hinders you in a way to compete if you go too hard in that direction. And the players kind of play tone deaf on this at times. Like they don't acknowledge or that understand it's real. And I mean, for Geno to kind of say, okay, you got 2 years left on your deal, Geno, there's $27 million of bonus money. You want $50-60 million more in new bonus money? Okay, well, we're going to sign a 3-year deal on that. Okay, split that up into thirds then on that bonus money. That's an additional $20 million a year that we got to put on top of the 15.5 per that you just go, how do we pull that off? Look at our cap space right now. And he goes, okay, well, do it on guarantees then. Give me guarantees in 26 and 27. Just guarantee my contract in that time. Oh, so we're going to guarantee a 35, 36-year-old quarterback 3 years out on a deal. You go, it's just not feasible from a front office's standpoint, all to me on this one.
Yeah. And I want to be clear. He's not holding out. He was at practice the last 2 days. You saw him practicing. Yeah. There's no indication that he's going to make a thing out of this.
No, it's no fault to Geno or Geno's representatives to ask for this kind of thing. I don't push. It's not, they got to do their due diligence with it. But at the same point in time, it's the Seahawks have to do the same on their side. Both have a fiduciary duty, let's say.
Right. So doesn't seem like anything's going to get done there, which, I mean, I guess that's okay. I don't have a big problem with it. I understand it. I still wonder if there's a way, but the only way there's a way is if Geno continues to be that one of one guy who will take massive discounts just because he doesn't care about money. And we don't know if he's that guy. He was that guy for one contract extension. Maybe the next one, he'll be like, okay, now I want to get the big bucks.
I would wager to guess, Brennan, I don't know this for sure, but given John's track record, it matches to this, I think, outside of Russ. And that is that I don't think he wants to get himself back into the pocket of some big monstrous contract. And that as Geno goes through this year, they're going to go through the year. And if he goes out and balls out and has a big year, it's more in the favor of the Hawks, I think, at that point to potentially move him, unless he's really taken the team far and deep into the playoffs. And it's more than just being statistically impressive. It's him as a leader and him really driving this team forward. And that would be great to see. And that's from their standpoint. If they're going to reward him at that point, then he's deserving of earning it. And you give him the money and they don't have any problem doing it. You don't really sniff at it 1 inch on that one. If it is just he statistically goes out and has a good year and you maybe barely get into the playoffs, and then you do have a team that's willing to give you actual capital, because let's remember, Brendan, there was a little slight of a dangling of Geno around the draft this year. It wasn't a full on, he's here on the platter, but there was a little bit of, hey, if somebody wanted to just want to make a little, just throw the offer, I mean, we're not trading him, but our ears are open. I think that there's a little bit of that play because John doesn't want to get back in that barrel. And certainly now we know from Geno is that if he does have that great year, he certainly is going to want to be paid at that, whether new deal happens or not. Now we do know that the next one's going to be, we're talking $50-55 million, probably bare minimum. And I just don't think John's going to want to go into that realm.
Yeah. That will be interesting because generally speaking, in NFL history, if a team has a quarterback that they really truly believe in, they don't give him up for anything. Like maybe they talk about it, but they like people are talking about Josh Allen right now. The Bills could move off Josh Allen if it doesn't happen for them this year. And I understand that in theory, it makes a lot of sense, but I feel like when the rubber meets the road on this kind of stuff, these teams look at their quarterback and they're just like, I don't want to risk getting back on this carousel when I don't have to. And they always just end up giving the quarterback whatever he wants. And if they're doomed to go 1 and done or 2 and done for the next 10 years, then, oh, well, at least we have a good quarterback. So they would be, they would continue to be trendsetters, right? If they look at a quarterback that they're like, no, we believe in this guy. We think he's really good, but we're just not going to go down this path. So they would be trendsetters if they decided to be one of those teams that did it because it's so rare.
And I'm definitely making an educated guess on this. I looked through the track record of history though with John and him, and when he looked to he was really, I think, driven as much by the situations with Russell to make the payments like he did. But I do think there's just from my given instinct on this one, if he can find that creative way of like, I'm going to pay a guy, it's going to be a guy like Josh Allen. It's me making a trade for a guy that there's no doubt about it. You know what you're getting in here as far as that guy. It's not he's pretty good. He's up in that above maybe fringe top 10 range. If I'm paying the price, I want the return. I want the difference maker. And I think absent that, he's going to be probably pretty much on the, let me look for that guy until I can find that guy, or we'll make do at the position and build up the other supporting parts around it.
Right. And so ultimately it's going to be up to Geno. If Geno decides he's going to roll in there and continue to be the guy who will take less money than the top of the market, then I'm sure something can be worked out next year. But if he is going to push for that Jordan Love style contract, then I think that's going to be a little tougher to sell. So it just depends on Geno's mentality here.
I think your Kirk Cousins example is a good one. If you're even asking for Cousins money, which isn't at that high end of spot, but it's at that spot where he can make the argument to say, well, hey, I'm now this age. I don't have an Achilles injury. I've been much healthier.
Yeah, that's I mean, it's a good argument, right? Like in fairness,
that's why
Geno should be able to say, I should be worth more than Kirk Cousins coming off an Achilles tear. But he's going to have to make that argument to another team, I think, because I don't think this team is going to be willing to hear that.
No, I don't think so either. And let's also face it, you and I both taking a look at next year's cap situation, and I think John's having to proceed very carefully around 2025's cap. Yeah.
Next offseason is going to be a little bit on the slower side, I think. There's not going to be nearly as much to it's
going to be creative. We just got to get creative with it. We got to move some money. A mil here, a mil there.
Which it's okay. I like our current roster for the most part. It's a pretty good roster.
Yeah, I do too. I'm the good. That's the nice part is you've through the couple years of rebuild and you're at the spot. This is where you shouldn't have as many necessary holes next offseason necessarily, but we aren't going to be able to go out there and be like, Brewster's Millions with it. Just, no. It's going to be like, Here's a buck.
Maybe the next off season, maybe the off season after that, we're going to have some money. We'll see.
Yeah, and then we're good. 26. Actually, we're good in 26. We're top 4 cap space on 26. So they can move stuff around, but like I said, you got to tread carefully next year on the cap as it stands, because we're $25 million of dead money in the hole right now.
All right. So one last bit of news from this week.
Let me just get a quick. Jason McEward, thank you for becoming a member of the channel. Sorry, a little late on acknowledging there, Jason, but I'm never sure if this is yours. You know how to tell. I don't.
It is on your side.
It's my side. Well, what's up, Jason? Welcome back into the Hawks Nest membership. I know you've been in here before, but thank you for that, man. I appreciate you for that. Radu Turkan with a $5 donation. Thank you, Radu. Great to see you in the house too, brother. Says, let Geno ball out and get value for him so you can trade him for picks. Geno will not be playing here for 3+ more years.
Yeah, and this is the thing that I talk about. If he does actually ball out, if Geno actually balls out, do you as a team have the balls to actually still move off of him? Because again, throughout NFL history, how many times has a team had a quarterback that they truly, genuinely believe is really, really good, and still they've moved off of him? Some people would say Russell Wilson, but I think in Russell Wilson's case, we didn't believe in him anymore. I think that was what motivated that.
Yeah.
Maybe Joe Montana, but he was so old at that point that I think there was also a sense that they didn't really believe in him anymore.
He had the back injuries, those backs. It's like, is it good today? Gone? Is it good today? Bad tomorrow? It's like, they probably had a bunch of like MRIs they were looking at, or it was like it was being held together by like a wispy parts of the spine thing.
Yeah, and Brady, I actually don't think they believed in him anymore, because that last year in New England, he was not very good. And that New England offense was really bad. And I think they genuinely were like, he's done. Let's move on. Maybe they were wrong, but I don't think they really believed in him. I'm trying to think of other examples.
No, I think you're right about, I mean, I don't know if, like the Lions in their case, I don't know if they definitely didn't believe in Stafford, or if that was a matter of they just said, let's do right by Stafford and let's, go. I think that Carson Palmer back in the day, moving on from the Bengals, I think they still liked him, but he didn't want to be there anymore. But it's to your point, if you go through 45, 50 years of football, this has been very infrequently done. And you're right about that, as being, this is just not something teams would do. You usually want to reward the player, especially a guy like Geno, who has been good that way. It does come down to the bottom line of, though, how much he wants to drive that price. And I do know that I think one of the things with John that was a frustration in dealing with Russ on the negotiation side of it was just how hard they did drive to make sure those prices were at the high watermark that they were. There just was not a lot of pivoting room there for John. And let's not forget, as far as getting your kind of butt burned by something, you still end up having to eat $26 million of dead money on a cap with the Russell Wilson deal. Like, it still burned you going out the door. And that was with him asking a whole year prior to still go, where it would have been $38 million that he was going to initially try to push for. And I wonder if this is going to instruct John just a little bit. It would me, I'd have to admit, on this a bit. But I think Radu kind of does touch on, if I was making a bet, Brendan, and telling you like, okay, he gets 4,600 yards, 35 touchdowns passing. You get into the playoffs, but you don't necessarily get to like conference championship. Maybe you win one and you're out. I still think the bottom line on that would be kind of a trade at that point, don't you? Or you think I'm off on that?
I don't know if I can agree with that. I don't know if I see that. I think if he plays that well, it would be.
If he's asking for $50 million a year, and I'm talking a 4-year contract.
Yeah, that at that point you probably can't do it. But then again, like I feel like when teams actually have the rubber meet the road on these issues, they're like, no, we're never going to give that quarterback all that, and then they end up doing it because they just are like, well, what are we going to do? Get another quarterback? It's true.
I mean, that is where it's going to be the interesting part of how this turns. But I do feel like there'll be a pull there a little bit if it does go that other way. If there is a team that's, and let's face it, there's a good chance there'll be some team who might be like, ooh, we'll bring Geno in here, and that'll be our final piece we need at that point. You might be able to tempt somebody out on a 2nd-round pick for him or something.
Yeah, that would be the other part. What is someone willing to give up for Geno? Maybe there's a really good trade offer out there. Maybe there isn't.
That's the part I was going through the other night with this too. There's about 18 different directions of road in front of us. This Geno situation can go, and a big part of it is how much he's wanting on the money, and if that's going to drive it. Does Zhang push back against that? Is there a trade to be had? What kind of years is he coming off? So many factors, but I think it's best for the Hawks because of that, Brendan. Bottom line, it's best for the Hawks to allow for that flexibility of this situation, to not get push down a road right now that they have to decide on, and actually let these factors play out a little bit more so that then they're able to make the best decision at that time a year from now.
Right.
Radu, thank you for that $5 and another $5 donation. I really appreciate that. It says, getting a decent quarterback like Geno is not easy to get in the draft right away, but at what point do you pull the plug? We're going to have to draft eventually.
Mm.
Well, I'll let you answer first on this one.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I don't think you pull the plug until you feel like the plug needs to be pulled. Historically, you don't pull the plug until you actually see legitimate signs that the quarterback isn't all that anymore. So I don't know if it's that. And also, this QB draft is not. It's not like this year. It's not. There are 5 guys. You got Carson Beck. You've got Deion's kid, Shadur. You've got Quinn Ewers. You've got Jalen Milroe, and then you've got Cam Ward. Those are probably your first rounders. Maybe the what's his name, Connor Wigman can move up there,
and Riley Leonard. Yeah, those 2 guys are the last.
Yeah,
maybe somebody's mentioned the Penn State kid. I got to look at him. So.
Oh yeah, Drew something, I think.
Drew Allers, not Allers, but something like that.
Yeah. So it's not great. And one thing I will say, so many quarterbacks went high in the draft this year. Maybe next year, a lot of the teams picking at the top won't need a quarterback, and that could push quarterbacks down. Like, who do you think is going to end up with the number 1 overall pick this year? Like, it could be Minnesota, right?
They would need the labor in the clubhouse because they got all the factors, right? They've got a tough division, and the team's kind of already beaten up to hell. So that'd be a team that would probably jump out to me and be like, that's probably your leader there at the clubhouse.
I don't think they're taking a quarterback number 1 overall because they already just spend a high pick on a quarterback. Carolina, maybe, but that would be one. They made a monster investment into Bryce Young. I don't know if they bail on that after 2 years. I think Denver has the potential to be really, really bad. They wouldn't take a quarterback unless Bo Nix shatters his spine.
It's true.
A lot of these teams, well, Raiders would probably take a quarterback.
Yeah, Raiders would be one of those ones that probably grab. So, but there's not it's not a ton like this was this last year. That's probably what set up those 6 quarterbacks. Going to your point, is the need of all those teams for a quarterback. It wasn't simply they were just first round rated, valued, and great. They got sold on them, but it was that pull of we'd like to get a quarterback in here too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's what I would say about this class. Maybe you end up getting one of the guys you like, but I mean, the best case scenario, realistically, I still think would be, Quinn Ewers is there at your pick, or Jalen Milroe, or Cam Ward. I'm not sure I really like any of those guys as a first rounder. So the opportunity might not be there.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to affect a little bit of it. Radu, I think when it comes down to this is why I do say we give it this year, because there was this huge push, I know, in my stream the other night, Brendan, and I think that there's a real, and it's probably as much because Geno's starting to push this out now into this sphere at this time, in this moment. He's decided to let's make this the center of attention moment as we're about to, which is kind of why I'm a little not soured on Geno with this, Brendan, but it's also give me a break. Let's just get ready for the season here. I mean, this, you handle this in the off season if it's that really much of a point of a push. The Seahawks need to let this play out, Radu. And that's why the other night I was really hesitant, and I'm still kind of hesitant on this, saying let's come to a firm conclusion on the Geno Smith situation right now, August 22nd, 2024. Why? Let's instead see what it does. Let's see what it does in this new offense. Let's see if maybe he fits into this and he takes off, and maybe they push to a conference championship. And I'll certainly be one of those people, if they're really out there making that kind of noise, they'll say, hey, yeah, let's get him onto a contract extension. Part of my support for Geno here in the long term is saying I'm open to him being a long-term guy, I will say, is the fact that he has taken a discount prior. So if he's in a different lane now where he's like, no, I need to be one of these guys at the top, I need to be shown my respect, which I always hate when then I'm going to look at it a little differently. I got to be honest with you. And I do think that John Schneider's going to look at this on differently as well. For some of the reason, Radu, and thank you for the triple donation, Radu. You're very kind. I really do appreciate it on that. But for the same reason of the question you posed in this next donation comment, was Russell Wilson considered a top quarterback prospect? Depends on what you consider a top quarterback prospect, right? No, not really, because he didn't go in the first round. My man went out into the third round of a draft, so he would have been more of a tier 2 guy. And this is a little bit of why I continue to say, when I look at John Schneider and his approach to the situation here, Brendan, it's not just instructed by go get quarterback and draft. It's also instructed by 15 years, isn't it, of his baseline. And his baseline is not necessarily one of making the priority at the forefront of what I'm doing, jumping up into a draft and going and getting this quarterback here. And if anything, with the quarterback situation with Russ and taking him in the third round, after you paid Matt Flynn, after you still had Tavares Jackson still on the roster, he'll more attack it like a numbers game than anything else. And that's also the backtrack to the Packer way of how he used to ran it over there. So that's where I think sometimes, in my opinion, there's a bit of a divergence between the way sometimes the fans see the quarterback position with John Schneider and the way I think he kind of sees it, which is that it's not in that same emblem of what most modern fans will look at of go get that guy, go get my guy, jump in that draft and go get to that. And I think from him, he's going to be more of, I don't want to spend that amount of money anymore. I don't want to be pushed in this situation. I don't want to be forced to do something. It seems to me, Brendan, you tell me if I'm off, but I feel like he's taken in so many ways. It comes from his history of taking a different approach with this than being, got to get my top guy, got to go spend the most amount of money on this guy. I think he's a little more creative in his outlook on it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see a little bit more of a sample size before I draw any conclusions about his approach here, but it could be. I mean, the way in which he deals with this situation is going to be very informative about his mindset here, I think.
Oh, wait, hold on. 15 years is not a sample size. When you got 15 years.
How many times do you get a player that you might pay at the top of the market and then you decide whether or not you're going to?
Well, I'm just saying that if it's a priority, you're going to make it a huge priority. If it's something that you put at the front of the line of the stack of your team building, then I think over a 15-year period, we would see more of an indication of that. I think if you're talking about a GM having a couple of year time period at an organization, you go, okay, we have a sample size of what he does and does not do. I think when you get to this level, that's one of the unique parts of having a GM here for this long, Brendan, in my opinion, is that you have a guy that you can kind of know what he does and how he moves on things, that it's not as much of a surprise on this kind of stuff. And again, it comes back to not just his time here, but also where he comes from and how often he's talked about his influences going back to the Packers and Ron Wolf and their approach to the situation as well. So it's putting it all. I'm definitely doing a little advanced math here. I'll get it. I do present that out there, but I don't think it's also based on just kind of paper thin logic and reason either. And that this is, I think, the way he's shown he's willing to go with it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, for 10 of those 15 years, we didn't need a quarterback because we had a quarterback. So you're still, you're looking at like, okay, pre-Wilson, post-Wilson, what's he done? He's definitely done some things in that regard, sure, but that could just be dearth of opportunity. Like he had a top pick in the 2021 draft. No, I'm sorry, 2022 draft, but there were no quarterbacks in that draft. He had a top pick in the 2023 draft, but the quarterbacks that were desirable in that top 5 were gone by the time he picked. So again, it could just be like circumstance. He could just be a victim of circumstance here. And he actually really wants to get that quarterback. I don't know, but
well, I think it's a pretty common thing. I think you'd say, and I'm not on that. If you have a GM that doesn't have a quarterback that's there and he's coming in the door, for instance, within the first 2-3 years, that guy, by and large, as a general manager, is going to make some move up in the draft to go get their guy, or they're going to go out there and spend money big on the market. And they didn't initially. Even up as the time you got to Matt Flynn in that contract, that was still a blue collar, mid-grade college. So even at that point, they still weren't years into that regime before Russell arrived, having dished out either of those two areas. So you have that, and then you also have this time period after Russell leaves where everybody in the fandom, everybody nationally, pundits from the East Coast to the West Coast were screaming for Schneider the past couple of years to jump up in the draft and take one of these guys. And he didn't make it that priority. It's no small thing. They were 5 overall, and you mentioned, well, a couple quarterbacks go ahead of us, but if he wanted to throw some king's ransom at those guys, he could have gotten up there, like the Bears got from the Carolina Panthers for the Bryce Young trade. But he didn't do what the Carolina Panther general manager did. And that's where I think there is that track record here of I go down this road, I'm going down this path. You can see what I'm doing. You can see my approach to it. And I've seen people, to my opinion, kind of guessing more outside the fringes of that approach. And I think he's given us a pretty strong indication of how he's going to go at it. It doesn't mean he won't take a guy in the first round. He scouted Josh Allen. He scouted Patrick Mahomes. but he's not going to do the backflips, triple over, jump through the hoop, leap through the fire to go into a guy or overspend on a guy either, I think, on the other side of that.
I guess one aspect to this that would be really interesting to know is what went into the Peyton Manning sweepstakes. How seriously did we court him? How much were we willing to pay him? Did we bail on it because the price got too high? Did he bail on it because he didn't want to come here? I'd be interested to know if he was willing to throw the whole world at Peyton Manning.
Well, I think to your answer on that, the answer would have been yes. He didn't, they sent the jet out there to him and he didn't go out in the jet. So they did everything they could to make as strong a push to go get him and would have been willing to do it. And I think you mentioned Josh Allen. If Josh Allen's available next year, I think that based on what I know with John and what he's looking for in a quarterback and knowing that he probably likes Josh, he's going to be willing to pay the price if it's worth it on that. But for some of these guys, the prices doesn't get worth it. You're trading up for a quarterback that's a roll of the dice. You're spending all of this money on a guy who's going into his mid-30s who could have his Achilles snap on a non-contact injury, as happened twice over last year to big-time quarterbacks. It's a risk that you don't really want to take going down that lane on top of spending all that money on top of him that you're not getting the difference maker for the position. And so I think that's a little bit of what, if I was to take what I guess on John, which is what we're trying to do here is guess which move he's going to be making here. I bet he would go more of that move. So it's not that he's not, hey, you Peyton Manning, give me an all-time great, I have an opportunity. Sure, I'll go for that. Give me a Josh Allen, one of the great quarterbacks of his era. I'll go for that. But I'm not going to overpay for B+ for 90 grade quarterback, right, on a Manning. And I'm not going to jump up in a draft to just go get a guy because the fans are clamoring and the pundits are clamoring for me to go do it either.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way he treats this situation could be very, very illuminating on his mindset here. I'm interested to see it. I'm going to be open to a lot here. I'm going to definitely be open to maybe there's some team out there that after this season will give a first-round pick for Geno. Like, I'd jump on that. Like, I don't think that opportunity will be there personally. I think he'll be too old. But if that opportunity is there, yeah, I'm doing that. If he, plays at a really high level and you decide to give him like $45 million a year, the Kirk Cousins thing, I'm going to be open to that too. I'm not going to love every second of it, but I'm going to be like, okay, I get it. So I'm going to keep an open mind on this. I want to see what he does this season. And I want to stress, he's not being a pain in the butt about this as of right now. He just floated it a little bit and messed around on Instagram a little bit, which again, for all we know, he just was posting rap lyrics, right?
Could be. I mean, it is possible. And it is, I don't want to throw it out that there's no chance that John doesn't either re-up him or maybe he does go hard in the draft. It's not out of complete conception that he is, but we're trying to predict his moves and look at what he's done and where he's gone. And unless he's going to take a sharp left turn on this, I think he's one that if we were to put him to that old thing, I like to say, Brendan, put John on the lie detector test. He comes out of the lie detector test saying, look, these quarterbacks, much like he told us last year, Brendan, in the guard situation, the guards are getting overdrafted. The guards are getting overpaid. I think if we asked him, do you feel the same way about the quarterbacks right now? He'd be like, yep. And just like he doesn't want to go that route, he's going to find, I think, a creative route to avoid that.
Right. And also about this discussion, I wonder about the Pete Carroll effect. If Pete Carroll had some kind of effect on the way John did things in the front office, because we know that there was a give and take in that relationship. I wonder if John will change the way he does things a little bit now that Pete is not here. That would also be an interesting aspect here.
Well, we do know that's where, sure, I don't think it was Pete. You'd agree. It's probably not Pete's idea for John to be out there at the pro days of Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, right?
Right.
That was probably not something that Pete was like, hey, go out there and do that, John. So I think that's to your point. There's probably a little bit of a different heading on this one in that way. And one thing I think that we can feel pretty good about is that, with him having this faith in Geno and that I think paying off pretty good, and certainly this faith in Russell Wilson and having that pay off in a major way, that John's got a fairly solid track record when looking at the quarterback position, and whoever he chooses is probably going to be pretty good.
Yeah, except for Charlie Whitehurst, I guess. I guess that's his one.
There is that, but he had an awesome beard, Brendan. It was an awesome beard.
Yeah. I forgot how much we traded to get him, by the way. I looked it up the other day. I was like, wow, I forgot about that one.
That wasn't a third rounder?
It was like a second and a third for a third in Whitehurst or something. I think it was like that. It was pretty bad.
That one hurts. Yeah, that one dings. Tough time at that point, Brendan. The quarterback position was not necessarily a real deep one across the league there. You really did have the haves and the have-nots. There was none of that middle territory I think we kind of have now, which is a little bit solider as far as the quarterback play goes for the mid-tier kind of teams.
And then those mid-tier guys get paid like they're a top of the list guy anyway. So
Yeah, exactly. D Riley, thank you for the $2 donation. D says K9 NFL MVP this year. Thoughts? Is there any possibility of that from your perspective?
I don't think we're ever going to see a running back win MVP again. Like, the position's treated like a punchline these days. I think it's always going to be a quarterback. And if it's not a quarterback, it's going to be like some edge rusher that has 25 sacks. I think the days of running back winning MVP are just kind of over. Like, they can't even get paid in the offseason. How are they going to win MVP?
Yeah, I agree with Brendan on this. And I think like he's intimating about other positions, I think that he's touching on, you've got to go above and beyond over the barrel on any other position to get the MVP. You might just have to throw for 4,800 yards or 4,000 yards and rush for 900 yards, and you can get an MVP as a quarterback. But if you're a running back, you better be posting a 2,300 yard total season with 30 touchdowns. And if you're a receiver, it better be 2,200 yards and 23 receiving touchdowns, or the 25 sacks Brendan talked about coming off the edge. That's what it would take. And absent that, I think you're not going to get there. I mean, Christian McCaffrey, I thought, made as strong an argument as any recent running back in probably the last 5 years of winning the MVP last year by his impact on that Niners team and what they asked of him. Couldn't get a sniff over Lamar. So I just don't think, I think K9's in for a great year, D, but this is just the nature of the beast when it comes to how they vote for MVP. It's more like MVP QB. Isn't that really what it is?
Let me think here. Yeah. When was the last time we had a non-QB? Was it Adrian Peterson, or did we have another one since then?
Adrian was, and you had Sean, but then
and Tomlinson. That was back to back. That was back when running backs winning MVP was kind of normal, right? Like Priest Holmes won it one year, Marshall Faulk won it twice. Like back then, it was common. Now
it was the dying star, Brendan. It was the star at its blindingly most bright just before it went to darkness. Because there hasn't been jack after that.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not against it, right? Quarterback's the most important position on the team. It's very rare that a quarterback wouldn't be the most valuable player.
Yeah, I can get that to a degree. There are times to me though where especially in Niner team last year, that look, Brock played good, but that's maybe one of the best teams in the league, and that's the guy who was carrying him. Was that back, and they leaned on him like the donkey trying to get up the Grand Canyon on a 110-degree day. They're just like, come on, Christian, go again. And it's like, man, can you get your number 2, number 3 here at some point?
Yeah. I mean, I would have been open to that. I actually think he might have had my vote at the end of the year. I remember kind of being, it was weird to me that a quarterback that didn't even throw for 3,000 yards won MVP. Like that to me was like, man, can we roll it over like a golf game, like skins where you roll it over to the next hole? Can we just count next year for 2?
It's still ongoing. Still to be TBD'd on this one, but he will have a great year to me. I've got him for 1,500 yards, 15 total touchdowns, 15 total 100 yards, 15 total touchdowns. You in about the same territory for Walker?
I think I'm a little bit less. I'm a little more optimistic about Charbonnet eating into that a little bit, but close, relatively close.
Okay.
And we've also got some depth there, man. McIntosh is fun. He's had a really nice preseason so far. The team seems to really like Helani. I don't know if he'll play very much. He probably won't, but there's some, and we're going to throw the ball a lot too. Like realistically, there's one ball and a lot of mouths to feed.
I say we'll probably be up around that 65% minimum as a passing rate versus run rate. And that does mean a little less for the running backs to have to be able to eat there, but he will be effective no matter how many touches he does get. By my Brendan and my standard on this one. And I do expect that from K9 this year. So hard to get that MVP though. If you're at another position, it's just the way that the voting's gone. Kasra, thank you for the $5 donation. I appreciate for that. Kasra says, I don't know if it's just me being biased, but Geno has a 78 and Spoon on 80 on Madden is crazy to me. Seahawks are always getting disrespected by the media.
Who cares about Madden anymore? Don't play Madden. Play other games.
They got a 2K mod now, I guess, on Steam that I'm going to go check out, Brennan, because I guess they update it with modern players, the 2K game. I guess the presentation's still better. It's still like, so I think I'm going to go check that one out. But Madden's never given us, I think like DK, they've got it like an 88 or something, or I mean, everybody across the board's pretty low, but they've always been kind of at that spot. They do.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the ratings are always going to be a bit off. I mean, nothing's worse than NBA 2K, and they gave Bronny James a 68. Like that, nothing Madden does will be worse than that. He should be like a 28. So at least you're not that. But yeah, Madden, like, who cares? It's not even the best football game out there right now anymore. At least that's my understanding. I haven't played the NCAA thing yet, but I heard it's better.
Yeah. The other thing too, Cosworth, with that is you can always, in the dynasty mode, you can always adjust the rosters and you can make them to what you want them to be and then start your fantasy up that way or start the dynasty up that way. And then I would always do that when they would always do that back in the day with us. Cause I'm like, these are dumb. They're not accurate. Ding, 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 ding. he's got more speed than that. So that's what I always do with it, but it's always that way, Kazra. And it's been that way for years with Madden. I can't remember last time I had the game come out where I'm like, oh yeah, these grades seem legit to me with what we got. They always seem a little low. Not bad low, just a little low. Just a little like Spoon 80. Top 3 rated cornerback last year. It's 80. Mm-hmm. Thank you, though, Kaiser. Big Boy Jess, thank you for the $2 donation. Do you think nose tackle Cameron Young is making the team? Where's Waldo on Cameron Young?
I think he will because we need a nose tackle. Because apparently, which I thought this was a possibility going into the offseason, Jaron Reed is being looked at as more of an end. I had a suspicion that he might be too small to play nose in McDonald's defense, and it looks like we're not going to be using him as a nose. I've actually seen more from Byron Murphy as a nose this offseason than I have with Reed, but I think that you've got Hankins, right? You've got a little bit of Murphy, maybe. Maybe we decide to play him at nose a little bit. I think you need Young there to bridge the gap. I don't think you're getting enough snaps out of just those two guys at nose.
We'll see on that. I'll be interested to see if they do really make that change with him over there. I mean, the last couple of games when they've had Jaron out there, he's the nose. He's the starting nose for you. Mm-hmm. At least that's the position. They may bump him a little bit, but that's where they've had him. Cameron, I think, is injured, though. I haven't seen him on the field at all. He's not on the ratings for PFF, so he's not playing currently. So, that's where I'd wonder, where's the injury at on him? How long away is he at on it? We haven't heard any really updates with it. And he's not been practicing, I don't think, throughout training camp, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe he got a little bit of some time early on. So at this point, making the team, maybe, but probably on IR. And then how long is he on IR? That part's hard to tell.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing too, right? If he is injured, like seriously injured, you don't need to use a roster spot on him. You put him on IR and like I don't think we're going to lose him one way or the other. I don't think we're going to cut him because we think he's bad. I think it's too early to make that evaluation.
Yeah. And it's also hard just because he hasn't done anything, so we don't know where, he kind of stands. But yeah, hard to definitely, I would say right now, if he's healthy right now, I don't think he's kicking off somebody we think who's going to make the roster and necessarily at that point. I think he makes the roster, but I think it's the health thing is the big push on this, is that he'll be at least the first 4 weeks of the season. I'm estimating, because we're not hearing much about the injury situation with him, that's going to maybe be a little bit longer than that, especially the fact he's not practicing at all. Thank you, though, Jess. Appreciate you. Kosra with another $5 donation. Kosra, thank you for the double dip dono. Says, just using Madden as an example of how how we are treated by the media. Our over-under is 7.5 wins. I guess always being underdogs isn't a bad thing.
Yeah, if you get out into the national media, I think you'd be very surprised at how many people think that Carroll was an elite coach who was holding propping the team up, and that without Carroll, the team's just going to collapse. A lot of people seem to have that belief, and that's really the only thing that could justify anybody thinking this team is going to be worse than they were last year, I think.
I agree with you. I don't understand quite, and I think some of it is that they're just doing this sort of lazy math of new coaches coming in, Brendan, just in general. Oh, a new coach comes in. That means that's always going to take a year to kind of get right. That's always going to take a year to try to And so, yeah, I just think it's with the 7.5 wins. The thing with that causer is that's also Vegas factoring in. Like, that's even beyond the media. That's Vegas, and Vegas wants to be on the right side of this because that's how they win their money and they make their money for the house. But I think that this is just people doing the lazy math, is what I've called it. It's not them looking at the depths of this team, seeing what we have, seeing the talent we've assembled, seeing how it's coming together, tracking it through training camp, hearing about the guys rising to the occasion, understanding the health of the team is really good overall. They're just looking at it and saying, new coach come in, team not good. And and that's where, to me, it sort of takes the fangs out of getting angry about it at that point, because it's like, how angry can you be about somebody that's not going to spend a moment of really looking at your team and analyzing what you really have or don't have in their assessment of it? It'd be like a stranger who hasn't seen the Hawks play at all telling you they're going to have 7 wins or 5 wins, or it's a rebuild year. And you go, okay, you've not even looked at the team for a moment. So it's hard for me to get mad at that. They're just coming up with a lazy opinion, and I know they haven't looked into it. And if you hear them talk, Cosper, they never back it up with anything. It's always just, new coach, 7.5, 6 wins. That's where they'll be at with it.
Yeah. It's, I mean, I again, unless you're using the coach thing, I don't see how anybody could argue that this team is worse than last year's team that won 9 games with a higher than average strength of schedule.
Yeah, I agree. I just don't see it as well, but it's certainly something you're seeing out there, I think, by and large across the board. So I get it. And I know it frustrates Cosra. It is something that's been here for years. This is, the majority of the media is on the East Coast. In addition to this, I know it's not something people like to hear in the West Coast, but we're in the Pacific Northwest. We're in their account of things, basically in Southern Alaska. So when you guys understand why we're looked at by the Eastern media out there in this way, why we can't get defensive rookie of the year, why we can't get offensive rookie of the year, why we don't get consideration on this type of stuff, you got to just kind of understand it's part of being up in the corner of the country where we're at. And it's not something I say be happy by, but also understand that you're both going to see it here now. And I've been seeing it for 30 years of my life, and you're going to see it for the next 30 years of your life into the future. So it's one of those things that you got to get eventually kind of to the point of going, well, it's the way of the world on this one. We're not really ever going to get our respect unless we're just so damn dominant, like the Legion of Boom teams, where it becomes impossible not to pay attention to us. And like you said, that puts you in the underdog role more often than not, but that's okay. It's not the worst of roles to be in either.
Yeah, I blame the Pac-12 for putting all their games starting at 8:30 Western time. Everybody just ignores us because back in the old days, all the Pac-12 games, they always started everyone was in bed. And they'd be like, why aren't our players getting voted for Heisman? Because everyone was in bed when your players played.
Yeah. I mean, even our games are starting East Coast 4:00 in the afternoon. It's a 3-hour difference. It's substantial time difference. Are all those media members watching our games, or how many of our games are they really watching? Or are they busy with their family on a Sunday evening? You just kind of go through a little bit and you go, this is just the way it's always been too. That's my thing with this. I can track this back to Cosra going and hearing from Seahawks fans in 93 and 94 and 95 and 96, 97, 98, 99 and 2000 when you had Holmgren. And man, they're not talking about our team. And we got Holmgren here and he's doing his stuff. And 2001, man, we still got Holmgren. He's building up. He's building good. Nobody's talking about us in 2001. It's been there for me for decades. So I come to it and I just go, it will never change. That's the part I just want to reiterate. It ain't going nowhere. We're always going to see that bias there. It's on award season. It's in the media coverage. It's going to be in their outlook for us as a team. And it's not something to get mad about. It's the fact with us being in this location geographically in the country. It sucks, but it's just our location. Can't change it.
Right.
Thank you, Cosper. I appreciate it for that. Radu with the $2 donation says, what is your guys' best Geno performance game?
I think it has to be that first Lions game, the first year he was the full-time starter, because if we had punted that ball one time in that game, we lose. That was the game where I think Cody Barton played like he didn't have any arms and the defense couldn't stop anything. And Geno had to play perfect for us to win that game. And he did. The ball basically didn't touch the ground when Geno had it in his hand. So I think it's probably that one, because that was also the game that made me realize, wait a minute here, we might actually have something.
Hard not to pick that one. I mean, that's pretty much like you say. You don't have a punt on the day. You're successful every single possession, offensively speaking. How do you pull off of that one? Not to say that's the one. I think the Cowboys one last year was also a very impressive one, where you consider the pressure rate he was under in that game, and yet that he was still able to really carry the line, despite the fact the defense just basically imploded in that one for the most part. That would be maybe another one that I might potentially look for. But I think you're probably right on the Lions game in that one. He was on it, and in the Lions game this last year too. The one that they got this year, where you got, I think, was it overtime?
Overtime game winner.
Overtime game winner. So there's a couple of them there. It speaks to Geno's strong performance over the past couple of years that you could probably pull out a good half dozen and make a strong argument for either of those half dozen, not just from a statistical bearing, but how he played, what he was up against in that game, and how he potentially overcame it and was able to really ball out.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Radu. I appreciate that. Cosra, Radu, thank you for the double dip on the donos, and all of you guys for the support here on the channel today. We really do appreciate it. And if you guys could, please hit that like button. So let's backtrack a little bit here, if we can, and go over a little bit of this recent game against the Titans, Brendan. We'll push in here to the preview here in just a sec, folks. We just want to take a little bit of a peek at this. It's kind of a tough, rough, sloppy game. We had a lot of third and fourth stringers in through a pretty deep part of this game, Brendan. Guys that I don't think we're playing a lot this season. Hopefully not. And it was still a good game. Ultimately, there's some good player performances to come out of this with it. But any major takeaways from you coming out of this game in general terms?
Well, when you don't have very many starters playing and you don't even have a lot of backups playing, you're looking more for something like general to the team rather than something individual to one particular player. So I think the thing that stands out right now with this team is the pre-snap motion offensively. A lot of you people have probably seen this tweet already. I've certainly seen it. I made a video about it. Through the first 2 preseason games, I think 2 teams have played 3 games actually, but Bears, Texans. So through the first 2 weeks of the preseason, the team that has used motion the most offensively, pre-snap or at the snap, you can be in motion at the snap, you have the Dolphins, who are literally destroying the world. They're at 80%. They're inventing a new sport over there. But second place at 70% is the Seattle Seahawks. They are higher than the 49ers by 1%. So, I have talked about this many times before on this show. There was a game the Seahawks played against the Rams in 2019, and the Rams blew out the Seahawks. It was in LA. And Pete Carroll, when he was talking about that game right after it ended, one thing he said was, the Rams use a lot of pre-snap motion, and it really throws us off and confuses our defense and makes our life hard. And I look at a comment like that, and I look at our offenses, which had traditionally been near the bottom of the league in motion, and I always wondered, if you think pre-snap motion is so good that you don't know how to deal with it with your defense, why aren't you using it more with your offense so you can at least equalize the playing field a little bit? And over the last several years, the Seahawks have made strides towards being more of a pre-snap motion team, but I don't think they've ever really gotten anywhere near the top of the league at any point. And it looks like this year they're going to be that. So if there's something to really get excited about, I think it would be that. More than any one player doing one thing, it's the pre-snap motion.
Agreed. It's the part of the NFL the last 10 years, Brendan, that is also, in addition to this, taken a big step forward. So it wasn't that pre-snap motion was as normal and prolific and proliferated in the NFL throughout, let's say, for 2012, 13-ish, as Carroll was there in that heyday. It became that way here as you kind of progressed into the 2020s through the late teens. And so this has now become something that is sort of industry standard. I think you've got to roll with. And the more you lean into it, I think the better, Brendan, as evidenced by, I believe it's not that, I think the Niners are at 3rd too, Brendan, on that list. So it's, Dolphins and Seahawks, and then you have the Niners. So 3 indicators of 3 offenses, or at least 2 of those 3 offenses, that are pretty effective in the way that they go about their business. And it speaks to why it is so helpful and effective. When you're moving stuff pre-snap, you make the defense have to communicate the adjustment of that movement. And when you have multiple movements, the Brady Russell play for the touchdown, Brendan, where we send one guy into motion, the middle linebacker, Mike, gets locked in, where he's like, oh, pick up the guy in the motion. I got him there. But then you bring one last little bit of secondary motion out prior to the play, freeze it up just a little bit extra for Brady at that point. Even the throw to Aesop Winston on the 9 route. You have a cover 2 shell staring you in the face at the start, right? And so then they bring the motion over, which pulls one of the safeties out of the cover 2 shell. So now if you're Sam Howell, it's either going to be cover 1 or cover 3. I've got a single high safety. It's a matter of now whether it's man on the outside. And because I have press on the outside, that's probably indicating to me that I've got man, meaning I know what Aesop can beat his guy one-on-one. I know that safety, if I'm watching the safety post snap and he doesn't drive hard on the 9 route, I know I've got an opening there, right? There's a little bit of an opening there for me to put it in kind of the honey hole spot. And when you watch the safety post snap and you watch Sam Howell's eyes, his eyes are on that safety and the safety's edging this way while the 9 route's going that way. But it's all off of that initial, you're starting out with the receiver over here in kind of a 3 set, and they're on that cover 2 shell. And the whole cover 2 shell's purpose is to remain in the cover 2 shell before the snap, Brendan, right? Because then you can flip it into whatever coverage you want it to be post snap. But with the motion, they force the hand of the defense to show you what you're doing. And then it makes it a very simple read for Howe, to where that's part of why it looks so good for him when he locks in and makes that throw there. He gets the protection, but it's also, he's got such faith in being able to make that throw because the read is so true to him.
Yeah. And, motion pre-snap can be many different things. It can be as simple as, like, there was one video on Twitter right before that Aesop Winston touchdown that you were talking about, where they put AJ Barner in motion from the slot going left to right, and they snap the ball as he's coming across the line, and he throws a block on the edge player, kind of a seal block, to open up a 12-yard gain for McIntosh. It's little things like that too. It doesn't always have to be a receiver, doesn't always have to be a running back coming out of the backfield or anything like that. So many different ways to use motion. And, defenses have enough stuff to think about, right? Defenses have enough stuff to think about without you putting guys in motion. So it's always going to make life harder for them.
You can have a strong edge, man, but if he's starting from that standstill versus that, to your point on that like tight end, if that tight end's moving, Hall was able to kind of take a guy out in this last game, which made it, that's why it was such an impressive play, is because he's starting from the snap dead still, and this guy's moving almost full speed come the snap, and you just crumbled him over. But that is a play that more often not will work in the tight end's favor, to your point on this, because he has the momentum working in his favor at the snap. And maybe I'm giving up 15, 20 pounds to that edge, but I'm moving full speed. He's just coming up out of his snap to try to greet me. And I should have a good enough a chance at that point to at least get a little bit of movement. And a lot of times these blocks in those places, Brendan, aren't even about getting the edge moved. Sometimes it's about just getting the hat on the hat, and then the running back's going to be through the hole by the time that guy's going to be able to do anything. It's not about you driving him. It's just get the hat, get yourself positional block for the running back to go past you, and you'll be fine.
So, yeah, that would be, I think, the most exciting development so far. Because, you look at that game, and the offense, I think, overall looked pretty good until PJ Walker got in there. And, it was one of those days where PJ Walker didn't look like an NFL quarterback. Sometimes he does, but sometimes he doesn't, which is why he's not making this team. And, some people were kind of freaking out about PJ Walker, but he was never going to make the team anyway. So why should we even spend any time talking about that, really? Like,
no, he's a reserve quarterback. He's a third string guy. It's the thing I would say that I would like to see with him, Brendan, is he's trying to do quarterback things, which I can kind of understand to a degree. But if you are eventually, God forbid, thrust into a place where you've got to put him on the field and start for any given time, you need to be using your legs. You need to be having some moments in the game where you're going out and getting that first down on a 3rd and 5 and running around and doing that. And he's shown a bit of hesitancy on that to me to a degree. And that's the part that's a little disconcerting, but it's not also a big, like I said, big deal, because it's not really, if we are to the point of calling upon him anyway, we probably have bigger fish to fry, like, horrific pass protection issues or, certain other things falling apart.
At that point, you're looking at Travis Hunter and Will Johnson and Shadur Sanders and Carson Beck anyway. So, there's that. But before he went in there, I mean, I was pretty happy with what I saw. Anthony Bradford, I thought, played a really good game, and he was the one starter who was out there. So that matters. And I do think that he's going to be the starter at right guard at the start of the season. I know that they're still saying that there's still a competition there, but I'm pretty sure Bradford's got it.
I think he does too. I thought he looked really good against San Diego last week, or Los Angeles. Sorry, I'm still having a hard time with that one. He did look still really good against the Chargers last week too. I know he wasn't as well graded this week, but he was still, to my eyes, still really strong in that game, both in pass pro and the run. And I think that you're right. I think he's set himself up as that starter right now at right guard.
Yeah. Brett, who else was there? Oh yeah, McIntosh, I thought looked pretty good. Apparently he's still having issues blocking, but there are ways around that. There are ways that you can use McIntosh and just say, we won't have you block. Especially because he has such a unique skill set where he can line up as receiver more so than most running backs. So there are totally ways around that. I'm not too worried about that. That 6th wide receiver spot is getting pretty spicy. I guess Aesop Winston had a really nice day. Cody White almost housed one from 80 yards out. Still made a really good play. So I wonder if there's a little bit of stuff developing there where maybe Derek Young could lose that spot, even though I still think he'll get it because of the special team stuff. That's really most of it on offense. Like defensively, I think the things that stick out right now are Derek Hall, who had another really good game, and I would say Mike Morris, who had, according to PFF, 4 pressures in that game. That was we might be getting something pretty good out of Mike Morris this year.
For sure. And he's doing it from the inside outside, which is the nice part about it, Brendan, is he's giving you truly kind of the Michael Benedict sort of role in how he's getting it done. It's not just coming from one or the other. And those guys were the most impressive, I think, on that defensive line from this last week's game. They did hold up well. Good to see with Mike, because it's nice to just get that rotation topped off. It's a good depth right now, good at the start, but if we could just get him in that development, that one extra kind of dog you got there on that line to make it go, that would be nice. And Hall's looking like he's taking that step forward, Brendan. Good against the run, good against the pass, making his presence felt on both areas. Only 23 snaps this week versus 30 snaps last week, but still made the most of it with what he was given. I thought the rest of the defense, Tyrese Knight played pretty good. It wasn't as well graded like last week, but I still thought he played a pretty similarly close to as good a game as he did the prior week. I thought he could have been credit for a couple of other tackle for losses that he wasn't for some reason on certain plays, but he was, I thought, still really impressive. He's really kind of in a lot of ways, more than any other prospect undrafted that we've taken here, been the most impressive guy from where my evaluation was and where we're landing at right now.
Yeah, I was pretty happy with Knight as well. I know PFF didn't grade him well at all, but again, there are some instances where I feel like, that's why you need to watch the game. That's why I watch the games. That's why I don't just log on here after the game's over, look at the PFF chart and read that off to a video. You got to watch it too. And sometimes they just miss. Like, I think Byron Murphy was graded poorly in this game as well. And I know he didn't play that much, but I didn't see him do anything wrong. So sometimes they just miss.
And they were running a lot of that soft zone coverage too with everybody, which I don't think was doing anybody any favors in that secondary or linebacking core, because you had just a lot of just dropping in those soft zones and getting kind of picked apart a bit. And it wasn't the same kind of aggressive stylings we'd kind of seen at times from them with the Chargers last week when McDonald was calling the defense versus especially Scott in that second half.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting that the lone Pete Carroll holdover was calling plays in that second half.
Pete Carroll. He was. I mean, it ain't wrong, is it, Brendan? He was kind of calling it like a Carroll defense almost.
Yeah. I mean, I don't believe in coincidences, right?
Yeah, I don't either. No, I don't either. Hell no.
Yeah. So I would say that those are the main takeaways. There were a lot of penalties, a lot of missed tackles, but most of them were committed by guys who were going to play very little, if at all, this year. Yeah, I think that's about the best you can say about it. It's one of those things where, yeah, there were problems, but the problems are on a lot of guys who won't even make the team, period. Like DJ James was probably the worst player out there. He may not make this team. I'm not convinced that he does at this point because it's so crowded back there with defensive backs. I think Levelston, the defensive tackle, had a bad game, but he's not making the team. So it's hard to get too worked up. But I saw you made a couple of videos about the Derek Hall play, which like his production so far this preseason is really exciting.
It is, because he's doing the things that you wanted to hope that could translate from college. Power, you and I talk about prospects. I always harp on the fact that power, if you have that at the forefront of your game, is oftentimes the thing that gets most neutralized at the pro level, because everybody's strong. Not everybody's fast, not everybody's quick, not everybody's explosive. I was getting some comments at times in videos and looking at Hall from some folks who are saying, well, he's slow off the line. And this is where you've got to also understand the type of player he is when you look at him. And if you're looking at Darrell Taylor and you look at a Hall, you might go, well, wow, he's so much slower off the line than Darrell Taylor. But Taylor's trying to press that edge, right? He's trying to run off that edge and get off 100 miles an hour off that edge and go as fast as he can. With Hall, he's trying to hit you with power. So he's trying to get his hands into you. There's less of me trying to get up the field and me of more trying to get into your chest and jack you up, forklift the hell out of your butt. And that's what he wants to do. So it's two different approaches. The other thing they're doing with him, Brendan, is he's being aligned out. You have your 0, your 1, your 2, your 3, your 5 technique, right? And then you have your wide 9 technique, which is the outside linebackers that are standing up, where they're a shoulder apart from the tackles in their alignment. That's essentially a wide 9 kind of technique for your edge. They've got him out there even a little further, Brendan, like another shoulder or 2 shoulders further out wide. So it makes him look that much longer, like he's getting to the quarterback. But it's all working together with your defensive line, because he's pulling out that tackle extra wide, which then sets you up to run games inside with the defensive tackles. And because it's so much longer, it's going to make him look longer and he's getting there. But you can see how he's a 4, what was he, a 4.5 4'6" guy, something like that.
It
He
was
had enough.
pretty good.
It was good. It was good enough. And you can see those tackles struggling to meet him at that edge when he's aligned out there, that extra wide. I mean, when you look at it, watch it, Brandon, the next day when he's out there, I mean, it's wide. It's like almost slot city for a cornerback wide. And then he's just barreling down. So he's fine. He's looking great. Good all-around play from him. I think Maffe's look good in little spots and stretches. They're not doing much with much of the vets. They've been fine too. So I feel really good about where the defense is at. You do mention DJ James. It is hilarious where scouting reports stick. You know, when we talk about these prospects in the offseason, Brendan, we're turning over and people go, well, how does that really go? Nehemiah Pritchett, DJ James, you and I go, okay, they can both cover. Tackling, willingness to tackle, want to get off blocks. And then Brendan, go and look at those PFF grades with both of them, you know. And Nehemiah got the coverage stuff up this past week. Run grade, tackle grade, not good. DJ, run grade, tackle game, not good, but the coverage grades were down this week. Last week, DJ James had the coverage grades up last week. But again, the run numbers were down. And why I bring this up is that, in my opinion, with those two guys, I think they make the roster, Brendan, for the 3 years of club control. And because that's going to be the mode with this new coach to go this way versus Artie Burns, let's say that you only have like a Michael Jackson on a 1-year deal if you kept him instead. He might be the better player. Don't get me wrong. He's probably the better player, but it's whether these guys can become long-term players is going to hinge on whether or not they can become tacklers and become good in that realm. It's at that spot where it's like, it's a big liability if they're out there in that part, and it can't be, I'm sure, from McDonald's standpoint, but you do see it here in the preseason so far with some of the early performances too. Yeah,
you do. And I think it's tough to really judge what decision they're going to make. Like, I would think that because he's a first-year coach, he would want guys who have long-term potential, but that may not end up being the case. Maybe he is like, I want to win now. I think this team could make a Super Bowl run now. Maybe he feels that way, and he's like, Artie Burns will help me more winning a Super Bowl this year than DJ James. Maybe that's the way he'll come down on this.
Kind of all depends, doesn't it, Brendan, on his outlook for this season of what he feasibly sees their potential upside this year. Is this a year for me to just kind of learn everything through and kind of figure everything out, and then we're really pushing next year? Or, hey, this team's got a lot of talent right now. Why wait? That you're right. The decision on that might tell a lot, because I have no doubt, and I'm sure you're as well. We're just talking about slot play. DJ James, slot guy only. Artie Burns, slot guy only at this point, probably. Artie Burns is a better player. I've seen more of Artie Burns to know he's a better player, but he's more expensive. 1 year of club control. It will inform us a little bit, even on that small little bit of a decision with the roster on how they go. And I do think it's a bit of you got to go one or the other on those kind of things. I don't think both of those guys make the roster.
Yeah, and remember, like, D. Williams is entering the conversation too. Maybe neither of them does, because we need D. Williams' returning ability. Like, I don't know if you noticed, but to my eye, he was the only guy returning punts in that Titans game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I will say, being out at camp, Brendan, it was rough watching the punt returners at camp. I ain't gonna lie. McIntosh dropped 3 in a row on my second day. 3 in a row.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, yeah, he's never done it. He's a kick returner from college.
I know.
He never did the punts, so
it's just like, shocked. Why not all off season? You're like a guy trying to make sure you can. It drives me nuts. Thing with Eskridge, because he doesn't even look all that comfortable with it. Like, I'd be working on that all day. I'd be out there with the jugs every day at the Renton Center, just be like, just give me 50 jugs every day. You know, give me some backspin, give me some forward spin. I'm gonna get out there in the rain. I'd get it down like the back of my hand, you know, which would be where, like, I'm gonna find my way on the roster just by this alone. I'm gonna make them force me on the roster by this alone. And you might be right on that whole Williams being the punt returner thing, because I didn't see a lot of other guys super comfortable with it necessarily out there at camp.
Yeah, I mean, even Chenault, and he's the guy that I would hope could do it. I don't know if he's familiar with it.
He was doing it. It was a heavy mix at camp, though, Brendan. When I tell you, it wasn't like 1 or 2 guys, but it was like different guys each 2 days I was out there in a different 3-stack set. So they were really spinning through the different guys, trying to figure out which ones. Lavishka was back there doing it. He was moderately comfortable doing it. It wasn't, you didn't hold your breath a little bit like you would on some of the guys where you're like, okay, he's got a trace, he's where it's at, he's tracking it. Some of the guys, you just, it's like a baseball outfielder where you're just, you know, little leaguer, you know, like, get in. And they're just backing up. But We'll see how it shakes out. It could be the impactful part on that last corner on the roster.
Mm-hmm. I think that's most of the stuff from the Titans game.
Yeah. Jason Myers is pissing people off, but we're not going to learn about that till we get the regular season.
Yeah, nobody's going to remember this if he makes his kicks in the regular season, which
That's right.
And if he doesn't make his kicks, he's easy to get off of next off season. And for now, we're just gonna have to live with the not knowing if we're gonna have a good kicker this year.
Yeah, just is what it is with it. Hopefully he's better. And hey, at least he's made his field goals, Brendan. So we do have that. We've got at least he's made his field goals here so far in preseason. If the PATs
Mhm.
have been a little bit dicey, so yeah, that was I think that's about kind of all we really had in the game. Like you said, offensive line especially was a lot of real backups in there. I think Oluwatimi probably showed you too, Brendan, why you have him in more of in that backup role now with Connor here. Not that he's bad or that he can't be functional out there, but he's also not really ready to rise either in these performances we've seen so far with him in preseason or what we've heard from him in training camp.
Yeah. How about Michael Jarrell, though, looking pretty competent out there, first time playing non-Division III football. I like that.
He's held up really well, and the Hawks are going to have a pretty tough decision there where I think it's probably settled itself out pretty clearly with, you obviously have the Fance as your one backup, and I think Stone Forsythe, as your other, but with Abraham Lucas, of course, probably going to IR to start the year, who is going to be that extra tackle you keep? And I would probably say right now, Jarrell's probably likely to be the guy to be that tackle you hold on to the roster at this point. I think Curtis will be more of a guard in how they consider it. I do think McClendon's going to make the roster. And we'll see how they shake out, though. It's an interesting battle there. You've got the Sundell guy, too. He's played pretty well, both moving all around that offensive line.
Yeah, I don't think he has a real chance at the roster. He might make the practice squad. Yeah, and I think the cut down day is 5 days away. So next time we do a show, if we do it in a week, we will know the roster and the practice squad. So these decisions are coming up very soon.
Very soon. It's right after that final preseason game that stuff comes down the line. So they want to give those players a chance to regroup through the league if you do get cut. And so, yeah, we'll learn soon on how they're going to play this. And this is one of the more interesting years because we've got finally the depth and the strength here for it to be interesting on that side of it.
Right. Before we get to this Browns game, there's one more thing that I just want to briefly touch on here. We now know what quarterback we're playing week 1. We now officially know. Not that I think anybody should be surprised, but some coaches still do the whole year of rookie. You got to earn your spot. The veteran's going to take priority here thing. But we are getting Bo Nix in week 1. We're going to have Jared Stidham on the bench and Zach Wilson on the bench. So, all the middle-aged women in Seattle, be very careful. He's got nothing better to do when he comes here in a couple weeks.
Watch out. He's cougar hunting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep. Just, be very careful. He might not be able to throw the ball, but he is very handsome.
Sons, lock up your mothers.
So it's the right move, right? Bo Nix is clearly the future, and even in the short term, he's probably a better quarterback than the other two guys, I think.
I'm a big guy that harps on letting the rookie quarterback sit for a year, Brendan, and that's the way most teams about 90% of the time should be running with it. But this is, to your point, one of those situations where you would say that's probably not as much of a necessity. What did he have? 65 starts at the college level?
Right.
You have that kind of preparation. You're probably good to go day one on it. And so, yeah, I think that it's a good move by the Broncos to do this. This year is really kind of a house money year for them. There's no expectations on them. They can do whatever they want to kind of do on it. And Peyton certainly has the pressure on him to make this work because he's made such a firm, strong move here to pivot off Peyton, to eat the dead money like they're eating. And look, Nix has looked really good in preseason. He's been solid, and he's a guy that we knew was going to be a great fit with Sean Payton in that he really works well on script. You give him a good script, he'll act the hell out of it. He'll give you an Academy Award-winning performance. You give him a B-movie grade script, he ain't going to be able to, chew up the scenery and make it work. And that is what Payton can give him. I think the good part of this, Brendan, as we look at it, is that I did a little bit of a deep dive into since 2019, the recent history of rookie quarterbacks. It was about like if you had 10 games, there might have been like 1 or 2 wins in there. And most of the rest were all losses, including last year. You had McDonald's Ravens defense taking on CJ Stroud in his first. This is the other thing I looked at in this, Brendan, since 19, the first rookie start. So I wanted to look at the first game to see how they did, because that's obviously when the nerves are through the roof. And so McDonald held CJ Stroud to one of his, if not the worst performances last year, one of his worst performances. And they did win that game to the Baltimore Ravens. And he's just, wouldn't you say, not the funnest of coaches to go up against if you are a rookie quarterback trying to read things across from you.
Yeah, you would certainly expect him to be able to dial something up to make Bo Nix's life very hard. And if he doesn't, I mean, you wouldn't be concerned yet because it's not like you'd be thinking about firing him after one game, of course, but it would be disappointing if he didn't dial something up to counter that.
Yeah. I think I'd be much more nervous in that respect if we had the old defense a little bit and you were going to be giving Nick's a lot of pure cover 3 looks prior to post snap, and he could read that, and Sean Payton would know that's coming, and Sean Payton could just have Nick's hitting a lot of out routes, stop routes, slant routes off that, and then just try to kind of eat you up on that all day, which I think is what Sean Payton probably would have tried to have done if it was that old defense. Now you can just completely try to just discombobulate him pre to post snap and bring those stack fronts. I mean, the blitz game and all of that too. I think you're just going to try to make life hell on him, and that home crowd's going to be turned up to the nth degree. And it's one of the reasons I like our schedule so much this year, Brennan, is we've had some games set up pretty nicely for us. You've often mentioned going into Denver, September, still kind of hot, like summer. You can't already can't breathe up in that thin air. So it's not the place you want to be. You're over here instead back home, and a lot better of a setup a game for you because of that.
Absolutely. Denver always wins their September home games, even when they're terrible. I remember, I think it was Carroll's first year. We went to Denver and got blown out by a team that would go on to earn the number 2 overall pick and get Von Miller. The only time, it's actually only been the last 2 years that Denver has been unsuccessful at home in their September slate games.
And they had to give those games away, didn't they? If I remember right, like they had to really
Yeah, that was the famous game with the Colts where it was 12-9 or something, 9-6 or something. They lost that game to Washington.
Wasn't there the Texans one?
No, I don't think it was the Texans. They won that game barely. That was the game where the crowd started booing their own team, but they eventually won. Last year, they had the game where they got destroyed by Sam Howell in Washington. And Wilson hit the Hail Mary at the end, but failed on the 2-point conversion. So last 2 years, it got away from them. But generally speaking, that's not a place you want to play. No,
agreed. And so we got the better one on that. I think this fits well to us for our first matchup, and I'm psyched to see how this looks. This defense. We haven't gotten to see in a full 2. We didn't mention that about these preseason games so far, but maybe we'll see a little bit this week. But McDonald has definitely kept things on the front side. You know, he's moved the fronts around where you'll have 3 guys here and 1 guy spread out here. Run some games up there, but they're not really running a lot of the stack boxes and blitzes on the back of that. Really, they've kept it pretty vanilla.
Did you notice those plays on like obvious passing downs where Boye Mafe lines up inside? It's almost like
an inside linebacker. Because he's not doing it like he's not walking up like a spinner like Clowney would do. Clowney would walk up over the guard and stand over the top of him. He's actually off ball like a Will. He's like a Will linebacker there, and then he attacks in. I did. The Chargers play, it caused it too. Because remember last week he was also at that spot where he's kind of over like the slot. So he's as the slot on the receiver. And so the quarterback sees you have the front 4 over here. So Mafi's not the third, he's not the 4th guy you pulled off the 3. And so you only have 3 left. You have a 4-man front here, and then Mafi's out as the slot on the play. And the quarterback looks over and he sees it prior to snap, and he's like, oh, my receiver will cook that guy up the slot. But then Kayvon Wallace is driving down over the top to hit the receiver and cause the interception to Kobe, right? And that's where my opinion is, though, when you watch the all-22 over the top, watching Kayvon drive, I think they were anticipating forcing the read to the slot. I think they went, the quarterback's going to look at that, see he's got a defensive end on a slot. He's going to go to their route. And if they run this crosser, which is what it was a deep crosser over the top, we can then have the safety drive down on the route, and you can maybe jump the route, or at least like he did, just knock his kneecap off. And that's what they were able to do. So I like those looks, man. And he seems to fit to it. He's getting pressure with it. Like he's kind of a handful from the inside, isn't he?
Yeah. I guess that's our NASCAR package this year. It's probably going to be like Murphy with the 1 guy with his hand in the dirt, and then Mafe up the middle. And then the edges are probably going to be what? Hall. No, it would be Hall and Nwosu.
Something like that. And probably you could move around different offshoots between all those guys. I mean, Hall moved inside to Auburn at times. So they've kicked him, and he's got some experience at that a little bit. So everybody might be kind of moved all over the place. We know that's what they're doing with the defensive tackles, is that those guys are going to be out to the edges. Those guys are going to be 1 techs, 2, nose tackles, 3 techs.
Yeah. So that should be fun, right? That's like amoeba defense type stuff.
Just makes it all that much harder to read because you're trying to identify guys. And when you start trying to identify this guy, but he's over there, he shouldn't be there. Why is he there? Okay, what does this now mean? We didn't really prep for that. You just make it harder the more you force offenses to have to think about more stuff. And that's what we're giving you, is just more stuff on film you have to prepare for, more things in the moment you have to think. And this is how we get to a place of utter confusion for offenses, and a big part of what makes McDonald's scheme work.
Right. So I'm excited for it.
I'm too. Well, let's pivot ahead here to this Cleveland Brown game, a game that will be our final preseason action before we do actually get to when this stuff is going to count, Brendan. And we did get an announcement from the Browns. I don't know if you've heard for sure or not. I haven't heard for sure or not whether Watson's going to be included on this, but we are going to get the Browns starters, absent Nick Chubb, who's still out with that knee injury.
Yeah,
But
I think Denzel Ward has a concussion too.
Okay, so Denzel will be out. And then did you hear on Watson? I tried to Google and look, and I couldn't get anything fully confirming whether or not he was in or out on that one.
They're still being vague on that. I don't think they know. So I don't think we could know. So I would guess that he doesn't play, but I certainly wouldn't bet on it either way.
Yeah, I would probably, and you can understand with them trying to keep him probably protected because they got a lot of money in that position. They got a lot invested on that, and they want that certainly to be a happy ending there. So looking at this game for our Hawks, we've got Geno going to be getting the start himself on his side of it, and we're going to get a lot of our starters out there as well, Brendan, it sounds like. I don't know if we'll get a lot of it. I think this is going to be kind of like that fourth preseason game of 10 years ago where you get a couple series and then they call it a day, but a little bit of a look, ones-on-ones, a little bit of a test. And the Browns offense gives you one that last year we saw they can be a little bit difficult because they will run the ball and they will really work that screen game and test you in that screen game.
Yeah.
Heavily.
Yeah. And I'm interested to see all that. Obviously this is not so much going to be a game where you're watching, trying to figure out who makes the team, because a lot of the guys who are playing are obviously making the team. So what I would say is that when we're talking about their offense versus our defense, you think about that game we played against them last year, where we were up 17-0. It looked like a blowout. The game looked like it was over. And then they started hitting those screens like you were talking about. They started hitting those little like bubble screens to the tight end. And we were not ready for that at all. It was a great counter to what we were doing from Stefanski, who I think is one of the best coaches in the league right now. I think he's done a phenomenal job the last 4 years. And I wonder how, not that this is going to be a game that is hyper competitive like that game was because it's a preseason game, but I do want to see if we're able to come up with a little bit of a better answer to what he cooks up, because both teams are treating this game as a dress rehearsal, even if it's not a game that has a meaningful final score.
True. You want to get this last chance to prep these guys for 2 weeks. I think that you're going to want them to get in there and get the good action in. I think the coaches are going to call a pretty close game to what they might normally call, at least early on this. And this defense has got guys that are going to want to get up the field. That's, of course, what you attack. You get up by 17-0 in that game last year, Brendan, and your defensive line starts to pin the ears back and go, oh, we can get upfield. And then that's when they start bringing that screen game in, and they really leaned on it. And Stefanski's just good with that stuff anyway. He runs a lot of the 2 tight end stuff as well. So you're going to get some of those heavy looks. Part we haven't talked about so far, Brendan, but it has been an interesting adjustment for Mike McDonald in dealing with the 2 tight end sets, because Nate Tice, son of former Seahawks tight end Mike Tice, was talking about this on his show recently about some of the ways he thought Mike McDonald's defense was going to be countered, because the question came up about, okay, this is the new de jure defense. How does this defense get solved? A la like the Carroll defense got solved by the cover 3 by deep crossing routes and the flood zone concepts and different stuff like that. So he said he thought a lot of it would come back to some of the read option stuff, RPO stuff out of shotgun, and 2 tight end sets at the head of that. You're just going kind of big on big, and you're trying to get the numbers game right down there to be able to run the RPO stuff. And so when we get these tests with the 2 tight ends at times, I think from these teams, it's a good little thing to check and see how he's playing it as McDonald. And the early thing I found in watching the tape on this is that they are running like a Sam linebacker with the front 4. So they're doing that thing that you and I have talked about the last 2 years about dealing with San Francisco when we played them. Remember, we brought this up a couple of times of, I know we're committed to this 2-man front with the 2 guys on the wide outside, but why don't we bring down the Sam linebacker again, a la like a Bruce Irvin kind of guy?
The bare fronts?
it's not a bare front because the bare front's the 3-4 in there. You're going 4 down linemen, and then the 5th guy is a Sam linebacker. So he's over the tight end. You got your 4 down linemen, and then he's strong side on the tight end heads up would be how you
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Okay.
It's essentially it elongates out your defensive line so that they can't crimp down on you if you have 2 tight ends on the line, you have their 5 down linemen, and then you have 2 tight ends. And if you're stacking a 4-man front, you can get kind of segmented off very easily in that. But if you bring an extra man with additional to the 4, now you got 5. Now you kind of have a hat for a hat down there, and they can't as easily kind of get you numbered games up, especially if they're pulling guys back across the formation post snap, because that's where you really get into pickle is, okay, you already have a numbers game. Now they start pulling guys, and you end up like an unblocked defender who's just kind of standing there in no man's land, and then they've got you on the other side of the formation. So that's where he's done it, which I like that he's doing that, because we said that's what we were saying about San Francisco. If they're going to go big, meet them with big. Don't meet them with big on small, and then you get toasted up in the numbers game, which is what we would do. We just stay with our front 4 and be like, all right, everybody come up and run up and fill your gaps. You have safeties running from 20 yards up to try to hit a run gap fit. And it's like, that didn't work.
Yeah, it's a new era. It's a new era. We're going to be a little more reactive. We're going to be a little more reactive to this kind of stuff. Yeah,
100%. 100%. Owen Carter, thank you for being a member of the channel for 5 long months. Really appreciate that. Says chances at DK getting over 1,300 yards.
I would say less than 50% because there's one ball and a lot of guys that need to catch it. But I'm not going to say it's that low. I'm going to say it's something like 30 or 35% because there is a scenario where the Seahawks decide their best path to success is just throwing the ball to Metcalf 10 times a game. Like, I mean, he is our most talented receiver, period. Like, he is clearly the most talented player on, I would say, this whole offense. So if they decide, you know what, sorry, everybody else, we're going to spam the ball to DK all season, then I'm not going to be upset about that at all.
Yeah, my belief is I'd go a little higher on the percentage points with it, Owen. I might be even up as high as like 65 to 70%. If, in my opinion, DK, every single season he's been a pro, has been able to get 1,000 yards while exclusively being used on the outside where it's very easy to double team him. And at the same time, the Seahawks haven't made a big onus of featuring him at all times. Then now when you have an offense where he is going to be moved around, including into the slot, and he is going to be a focal point, is there 300 more yards over the course of the season then for this guy with those kind of conditions kind of adjusted? I think there is. And I'm believing the coaching staff when they say they are going to make this guy that focal point that way. And I think it's just part of the straightforward things they're doing, Brendan, off the rip, this coaching staff that has me so enthused by them, is they're taking those things that we've said were the easy advantages that you can pick up here that aren't things that require you as a coach to be super brilliant. Like make DK Metcalf a focal point of the offense. Use motion. Change your coverages up. Why has the defense been better this preseason despite the fact you're not using those stack boxes or those blitzes? Big part of it is those coverages getting flipped up to these backup quarterbacks, and they don't know what the hell they're going to see. So I've said the era of the backup quarterback dominating your Seahawks defenses are over with. So I think they're picking up this little advantage here with DK on this side of it, and I do think he is going to get, if not at over 1,300, he'll be right around in that area.
Yeah, I think he'll get relatively close. I don't think he quite gets there, but it's not unrealistic at all. Like, maybe this is the year where Lockett becomes a more situational player, and you end up putting the pressure of the passing game all on Metcalf and JSN, and Fant becomes like receiver 3.
Could very well go that way. And like you said, too, there could be just all the balls get evenly distributed all across the board. He ends up getting 1,000. It's just that you and Walker, Charbonnets, JSNs, Fants, everybody's kind of getting their slice of the pie a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Farrell Brown's going to get very many balls, so you don't have to worry about him so much.
It's true.
But yeah, are you going to end up using like 4 different running backs? And if you do that, like they're going to have to get the ball at least a little bit. Like, again, it's a very deep offense in terms of playmakers. So I just don't know if any one guy is going to get over 1,300.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you again, Owen. Appreciate you. Casper, thank you for the 3rd donation today. Appreciate you on that. Very, very kind of you. Excited to see Tariq and Spoon finally get to play press man. Imagine keeping your players away from what they're best at for so long. It's frustrating on that part. It's both encouraging and it's frustrating on the prior. So, but Brennan, you said in your story here, earlier on the stream with Carol, noting in 2019 with the Rams, man, they took us out to the woodshed, and they did so on really the back of motion, but yet doesn't get incorporated in. And this is a little bit to me of an outcropping of that, isn't it?
Yeah, I would say that as well. It's not that hard to play a lot of man. The teams that play man the most in the NFL play it about half the time. So I'm not asking anybody to play man 80% of the time. That wouldn't work at all. But there's a middle ground here where you're getting the most out of your players. I mean, we're fortunate that Reek and Spoon have both proven they can play well in zone. They can do good stuff in zone. But I suspect heavily that both players will be better in man. So even if you only get that up to like 35% of the time, like a little bit more than a third, you're still going to be one of the most man-heavy teams in the league. So it's very reasonable to do. And to my knowledge, to my recollection, McDonald didn't do a lot of man coverage last year in Baltimore.
No.
So if we do it a lot this year, and it seems like we will, then that is definitely something where he came in here, looked at the talent he had, and was like, this is how I maximize.
Agreed. Yeah, because I do think it's the tenets of the defense do drive towards man coverage. That the origins of this defense come from a man coverage concept, not as much zone. But I think that, to your point, part of the reason they played so zone heavy with the Ravens last year, Brendan, was because of the fact that they didn't have the talent that could run man. So he used what he had. He worked with what he had to make it work there. And these guys are so good at press man that I just think that's too big of a draw, especially understanding it's the natural pull within this defense to go that direction, Kazra. You go from any of the Ryan brothers to the Ryan father to Wink Martindale, take your pick of any of these guys, and they all have a drive at some point or other to get back into that man concept, stack those boxes, run those blitzes, and it all goes together for them, being able to run all that. And you just make an offense, a long day for an offense, because there's nothing you can do. If I've got two guys on the outside locking those guys down and I run those stacked boxes, we just can't hold up. There ain't nothing we can do eventually, because you're going to be able to overload it. You're going to be able to get free rushers through there. And the only beat is for us to have the one-on-one guys on the outside that can then beat those guys without help over the top sometimes. But you have guys that can hold up on their own all the way through the course of the route in man. And that's going to be, I think, the pull here a little bit from, it'll be interesting. Like you said, we don't know for sure because he's done it a couple of ways, but I think there will be a pull for him to go to that man stuff. I do. Thank you, Kazra. Appreciate you for all of your donos and support today. Coda Dad with a $14 super sticker. Thank you for that. Coda Dad, nothing on the note, but very kind as always on that. I know you dropped many donations in your time here to both our channels, and so really do appreciate you for that.
Yeah, it's a super sticker, but it doesn't show up on the StreamYard side. So it's probably like a dancing pineapple or something. That's usually what super stickers are.
Yeah. StreamYard's got to get on that. I need my dancing pineapple. No, bro. Thank you for the $2 donations. How is McDonald's defense different from Carroll?
Well, this stream's probably going to run to midnight as we try to tackle this one, but we could go on for a while about this one.
Yeah, it's probably about as night and day difference from conceptual designs in defense to schematic playing. I mean, general terms, this is a defense that's looking to confuse offenses. What you see is not what you're going to get. This defense can kind of do everything everywhere. It can run man, it can run zone, it can run stack boxes that drop to 4-man fronts, it can run stack boxes that run to blitzes, and it's going to mix all of that up. Mix it all up constantly, like you got a blender going on defense. Carroll's defenses on the other side are built more on simplistic. Have the players not have to think it much. Not a lot of different moving parts going on. You're going to play a lot of the similar kind of coverages styles, but then that will allow theoretically the players to play real fast, loose, and free. To play kind of a faster extra step in those theoretical defenses that have to think a little bit, a la like a McDonald defense. So it's a little more of one defense tries to build more advantages up for the player and what it brings to the table for the players. The other defense says, hey, we're going to free you of the shackles of all of the nomenclature, all of the X's and O's, and doing this adjustment, making this rip, and you're just going to get to go out there and play ball and just cut it loose. And both styles can work. I do think one is more effective in this current day and age, though, that we find ourselves sitting in right now. No, bro.
Yeah, I think that does a pretty good job of running the basic ideas down. I think the biggest difference is the way in which Carroll's defense tried to do the exact same thing every single time, stay in that very narrow window. It was a defense designed to be run by a team that had like 4 all-pro level players on it. It was a defense designed to be run by having a top 2 cornerback, top 2 safeties, top 2 linebacker. And McDonald's defense is much more trying to get the most out of the players that they have. I think it's a defense that can get a lot out of lesser talent. It's a defense that is designed to find ways to trick the opponent. I think that the best example we've seen so far in the preseason is that first game where we used 6 different coverage schemes, cover 1, cover 2, 2-man, cover 3, cover 6, all these different schemes in one game. And everyone was used a decent amount. No one scheme was dominant over all the others. You never would have seen that with Carroll. He would have been in cover 3 like 95% of the time.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's just another good way of kind of putting it with this. So just completely different paths and directions that you look at with it. I think Carroll's defense too, Brendan, was one that was constructed kind of decades ago a little bit, and it's in what it was. And what I mean by that is that when it was constructed, offenses were much more in their nature likely to try to take deep shots down the field. They were less risk averse, more you're going to count on an offense over the given course of a game, over a couple of times a game to try to take that shot. And if you had guys in the back end that could be there in coverage, you could make those offenses pay the price, the ultimate price for taking those shots. Teams got really patient, and it's been driving this way in the NFL offensively over the last few years in a big degree, where teams just don't throw much of the 9 routes anymore. They're not trying to take the top of the defense off. They're willing to be patient. And that's unfortunately a little bit of the kryptonite for the former coach Carroll defense on that side of things.
Absolutely. That's another big part of it as well, which is why it's going to be so nice to see some of the things this defense does this year. They might give up more big plays. They might give up more busted coverage touchdowns, but overall, the product should be better.
Yep. And we're not going to get death by 1,000 cuts anymore. No more of that stuff. It's no more of the slow bleed. It's going to be like, you're going to earn everything you get. And like you say, a couple of big plays, but to me, big plays aren't the worst, because that ain't a 15 play, 8.5 minute drive that takes the wind out of the stadium and the wind out of the sails of the defense at the very same time. Mm-hmm. Thank you. No bro though. Appreciate all of you guys for all of that support. So when it comes to this offense and performance from Geno, I think we liked it. I think we all know what we'd like to kind of just see Geno come in there, be steady, make a couple good throws, look great with that. Sam Howell's a guy we didn't talk about here, who actually had a really good game there against the Titans. Has he better solidified himself in your mind? Do you need to see more from him here in this Browns game to start to make you feel not only comfortable about him as a backup, but maybe more within the potentiality of a quarterback of the future?
I don't think I need to see anything more from him. Obviously, if he plays, he's going to want to play well, because you always want to play well. But I don't think the preseason is something where you need to see excellence all the time. You just need to know that the team is capable of playing really well. So in the case of somebody like Geno Smith, who hasn't played all preseason, even if it's just one drive, I want to see one good drive from Geno Smith, right? I want to see 1 or 2 good plays from a guy like a DK Metcalf. I want to see 1 or 2 plays. I want to see a good drive from a guy like Charles Cross. So I don't really need to see consistent excellence in the preseason, because I understand how this works. You're not really going to be completely invested in it. You just need to know that good things are possible. So if we get through this whole preseason and we didn't see anything good from Geno Smith the whole time, that would be something that would maybe be a little bit concerning. I remember there were some preseasons back in the day with Russell Wilson where we would get nothing done. Like the offensive line would just immediately collapse on every drive we had him out there. And we would have like no scoring drives with Wilson in the game. And it usually precluded a season where we started really, really slowly offensively and just tried to win games with 12 points. So I just want to see, even if it's just for one drive or one quarter, I want to see them show that good things are possible. And in the case of Sam Howell, he's already shown that those good things are possible. So I want him to play well for obvious reasons, but I'm not going to hold it against him really if he doesn't, because I already feel like I'm feeling pretty good with him as my backup right now. And I'm feeling pretty good about him. I don't think anything that happens in this game is going to make me change my mind on Sam Howell for the future. And I even made a video about that earlier this week, talking about how, look, if I had to bet on him being a franchise quarterback in the future, I would bet against it, but it can happen. It's not like it's got like a 2% chance of happening. It's not a 5% chance. It's not, I don't even think it's 20. I think it's more like 30 or 35%. That's not that bad of a wager at all. That's not that low of a chance to do. But if you're asking me, like, do I think he can move that percentage with what he does in this game? Probably not.
I think I look at like two different flowers in a pot on the windowsill. You have a Geno flower that's been around for a few more years. It's a little bigger, a little brighter, flower, a little bit more in bloom. You're trying to feed that and see if you can get to it, the biggest it's ever been. And then you got a little bit of a smaller flower next to him in Sam Howell, and you're trying to do the same thing of, can we build this guy? He's much smaller, much younger. Can we get this thing going? And it's a year in both of those cases of evaluation, Brendan, on trying to see where they're at in this offense with this new regime and what you want to do then going forward. But I think it's open-ended in both of their two cases where it's to be decided. I would like to say that I don't think I have anything else I need to learn about PJ Walker. I'd kind of like to see Sam Howell like pretty much this whole game outside of Geno. I'd like to see this young kid get the snaps and get another full game out in the system, because he might not play a lot as we go into this season. And this is his last opportunity. And we kind of saw what we've seen from Walker. He is what he is.
We signed that quarterback a couple days ago, the local kid who played college at like Saginaw Valley State or something, or one of those really, really small colleges. I wonder if it's him.
Maybe they end up going to him in like third quarter or something. But boy, I think that right now Sam could really benefit from within this offense, learning it better, having more tape he can reference in as he goes into this season. You know, he may not play again until next preseason, for all we know. So this is your kind of last run to maybe give him that. I'd like to give him that heavy, good amount of run. I don't need 2 quarters of Walker.
Yeah, bring back Holton Allers at that point, or Ahlers or whatever. He's more fun than PJ Walker.
He was fun, yeah. Well, he is, because Walker will throw it in the chest of a guy. I did my like, come on, man. It's like he's got this propensity of like throw it in the chest of the blitzer. Or off their head like he did with Jamal Adams last year against the Browns. He doesn't use his legs. He's a super mobile guy, Brendan, but he doesn't like use his legs. You played behind Lamar Jackson for 3 years. Use your legs. All those mobile guys all want to be like, no, I'm a passer. I pass, man. I have like a really good arm I can throw. I don't just need to be a runner. It's like, ride in on the horse that brought you.
Yeah, it's not that bad. It's not that bad of a thing to be mobile.
No, in fact, it's becoming more of a prerequisite. So and if you can't read defenses, if you got a little bit of a smaller size, then you better lean back on it. And that's the part where he's not done that for the first 2 games here in the preseason as Walker. And he's not bad, but is what he is. And with Hal, I just think that there's some seasoning there that could be beneficial if you give him some more snaps and let him go through, let him have some creativity out there. Let him make some adjustments. Let him do some advanced stuff if you're from Grubb's standpoint to play around a bit with it. Just an idea.
Yeah, I don't need to see PJ Walker in this game. I agree.
Yeah, no PJ Walker. Defensively speaking, we are going to get the starters in this one again too. I guess there's, again, not a lot extra that has to be really developed here. I think we've got everything, especially the Michael Jackson trade now, probably a little more certain up. I mean, maybe Carlton Johnson and D. Williams are fighting it out there with DJ James and Maya Pritchett as the corners, but safety, I think, is maybe locked in. I still maintain, I think that you're carrying maybe the extra safety like a Blair versus the extra corner, I think, when it's all said and done on this. But do we have anything else that we are looking from the defense in this game in specifics against? I mean, they're going to run the ball. They're going to challenge the screen game like we talked about a little bit, but just more from a personnel side individually.
It might not be until later in the game, but I would say that let's see what D. Williams does, because the best way he can earn that roster spot for return stuff is by doing something as a cornerback as well. And maybe even as a receiver. By the way, I talk about this sometimes. He was actually, when we signed him, he was listed as a receiver everywhere. And then we started playing him at cornerback and people were like, whoa, that's weird. But, if he finds some way to show he can do something beyond just return kicks and punts, that's going to be important, because I still think we might just have to jam him into this roster somehow, because we need somebody that can return punts. And he was really good at it in college, by the way. He was a great punt returner for, I think it was Tennessee.
It's been a problem for us in recent years. So it's no small thing that we're looking at this. It's been fumbles and lack of productivity from bad. Yeah. Don't field the punt and it rolls back another 20 yards behind you. Those kind of things.
I'm going to say Nelson Caesar. I want to see Nelson Caesar, because if he looks at least playable, that liberates you to maybe let go of a Darrell Taylor and save that money.
Very well could. And he was better graded than Taylor last week. When I was watching the film, he didn't stand out to me as much. He's got the cool tape wrap thing on the hand move. That always makes you look tougher. It's not quite the taping on the fingertips, but the wrap tape move around the wrist is definitely badass. Like that's pretty.
Who did the finger thing? Eric Weddle? Didn't he do that?
Eric Weddle was a finger guy. Yeah, he would do the little individual fingers. I do it too if I was a football player. It's a good look. I like that look. Yes, he was well rated by PFF. I think he was like our top 3 or 4 rated player on that team or in defense last week. But Taylor didn't look bad either. He had a succession of some rush moves early in the game. I don't know if you locked on him where he did a little spin move and he got inside, created pressure. He came back, bull rushed, actually got some push with the bull rush, but the tackle's anticipating a little bit of off of the spin move. Do I got to worry side to side? And then he came back on the next move and actually then attacked off the edge a little bit. So he kind of did he did a ghost move off the edge as the third one, like in a succession of 3 moves. So, if he's going to make the roster, it's as a pass rusher and that he can show, hey, I can bring a good level of production as a pass rusher if you put me in this role. And that's just what you have me fit into, which the other 3 edges are holding up their end of the bargain, Brendan. Then he is kind of freed up from that. But that is a battle to probably watch in this game of, who plays the run better, who's more consistent, and can Taylor do enough to hold on, because it is also a matter of him making 4 times the money of Nelson Cesar.
Yeah. I'm also thinking about linebacker, because I've gone through this whole offseason assuming we're only going to carry 4 inside linebackers. So you've got Baker and Dodson. Those are your starters. Then behind them, you've got Tyrese Knight, who isn't going anywhere. And then for that last spot, you've got Michael Barrett, who you just traded for. And then you've got John Radigan, who's looked a little better this preseason. How are we going to make that work? Are we going to cut one of those guys? Are we going to try to practice squad Radigan again? Is one of those guys going to go down with a mysterious IR-able injury so we can keep him around? Like, I want to see what goes on there, because now that's actually interesting. Because before this trade, I thought it was pretty much settled science how we were going to go there, but Barrett mixes things up a little bit.
I could see him doing the one less, you got the 4 edges, you go with the 1 extra safety, you go with the 1 less corner, and I could see him potentially going with the 1 extra linebacker at 5, just because of where the health of the position's been at recently, and that you're a little worried because Radigan's dealing with the heel thing too. I know that's part of this move as well. So maybe a play on that. Hard to predict this roster exactly on those last couple of spots, but I think it is something to watch to see if there is between those guys. This could be a bit of a determining factor. Certainly Knight is making the roster at this point, no doubt, but Barrett might get a lot of run, Brendan, right from the jump. He knows this defense. He's played at Michigan, so not a huge learning curve walking in. Maybe they just run him a lot, and it is between him and Radigan. But if I was making the guess, I bet all 5 of those guys make the roster on that.
It's just the question is, who are you sacrificing? McClendon Curtis? Are you sacrificing Derek Young? Or is it Marquise Blair? Is it Artie Burn? Like, it's what I'm trying to say is they really need to expand the roster to 55 because they added the extra game.
Yeah. Oh, it should even be more than beyond that. NFL's been really latent on this one and allowing the roster being a real feasible, functional place, because these teams getting stuck where they don't have any depth. And it's like, why do you want a team in a place where they're signing guys off the street? You're midway through the season because they don't have any other options, because you've restricted them of having any other options. And I don't like it as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that would be most of the stuff that's really relevant here defensively. Like, I don't need to see more from Derek Hall. I've seen enough. I don't need to see more from Boye Mafe. I've seen enough. I'm happy with all that. Woolen. I don't need to see more from Woolen.
Murphy. Let's bubble wrap Murphy. We don't want 3rd preseason game Murphy to go down to some silly injury. Like, let's just get him to game 1. He's fine. He's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Williams too. I think you can give him like a series. I don't mind the series or 2. That's fine. But let's just get him in and get him out, and let's take it. It's been we've gotten some guys in the last week, Brendan, a little injuries aren't full on mounting, but they're kind of they're not mounting,
they're building up
now. So let's be a little careful. We haven't gotten to game 1 yet. So let's just take it easy on this side and get through this game, make it a well-played one, and get to this opening week here against this Bronco team. So we will be pivoting this here soon back to next week. It'll be more of a Brendan at that point. I guess we'll be doing more of a breakdown of this past game. Then we'll be a future look and talking a little bit about the roster, because we'll have the cuts by that point. So we'll be able to give you guys a breakdown of why they chose the direction they went with some of the roster cuts. And certainly this preseason game against the Browns is going to educate the team on what they're going to do with that and which way they're going to go.
It might be a little bit of a shorter show because we won't have a preview yet, but we'll be able to talk about some stuff for sure.
Absolutely. So please do, if you guys haven't already, do sub up here on this side. Hit the like button here at the Hawks Nest if you're on this side. If you're on Seahawks Brendan Nelson's side of things, please do sub up and hit the like button on his end of it, as he does more than daily content over on his side of it. And Brendan, appreciate you coming on in here and chopping it up as always, man. We will be flowing through regular style this year.
Right. I'm ready to go. So yeah, see you next week. Can't wait to do it again. Thank you for having me on.
My pleasure, man. Always great to have you on. Well, we will be indeed back next Thursday, 7:00 Pacific Standard Time, and hopefully celebrating a Seahawks win. But what we will be doing is getting very excited as we are fully now rounding our way to the start of the regular season, what will hopefully be a great Hawk year. You should be hyped up. It's been a great preseason. Injuries are pretty well in line so far. They're not mounting, Brendan. They're just Okay, not mounting, just now. We're halfway there, but it has been a very successful onboarding of this new Mike Macdonald scheme. I think me and Brendan are nothing but really encouraged and have really hard pressed as much to find things that we're worried about or that are problematic in what we're seeing from this team right now. So you should be encouraged in that way too. You should be emboldened by what this team potentially can do this year. The pundits are going to count us out. Gauzer was talking about it earlier. We got the East Coast bias. We're Southern Alaska. Nobody thinks we're going to do jack diddly dandy. But that doesn't mean we can't. That doesn't mean that we can't go out there and shock the world this year. So keep the faith, my fellow Seahawks fans. Dream large this year. Don't think that this team's just got to turn over and wait a whole nother year out. It might just happen here and now. So don't you ever forget. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.